Good evening. You can tell it's summer. People are more talkative. I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education on June 16th, 2025 to order. Mr. Drew, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Here.
Ms. Larimer.
Here.
Ms. Minke. Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Here. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we welcome you this evening to the Commodore Building. We thank you for attending the meeting. Since we care about the safety of our students, staff, families, and guests, we want to note that there are exits on multiple sides of this room. In case of an emergency, there is an AED just outside the cafeteria doors. If you need to call emergency personnel and need the address, it's 140 East Indiana Avenue. Item number 2 is our agenda. There was one addition to the proposed agenda, 18.5, to schedule a special meeting of the board. With that amendment to the agenda, I'd like a motion to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
Ms. Larimer, Mr. Bennington. Mr. Drew, roll call, please.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes. And our next item of business is 3 in our Board of Education recognitions, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Hostler.
Well, thank you very much. Today we have, I know it's June. It doesn't feel like June yet, although it's getting to be that way. But we had some great accomplishments that are needing to be recognized by this board. So we have actual 2 teams that we'll be recognizing, or 2 sports, 3 teams. And then we also have a junior high team that we'll be recognizing next month. So, but we want to begin with our state qualifiers, and that would be starting with the boys and girls track programs. So I'd like to introduce Coach John Monheim, our girls track coach, to come up, and also Matt Gossis, our head boys track coach. I'll be taking a few moments to introduce the state qualifiers from the program. Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, first of all, I want to thank the board for the opportunity to recognize these athletes. I'm short a few tonight. Our 4x800 relay team finished 4th in the state, and if you finish in the top 8, you're considered All-Ohio. So there were 185 4x8 teams that started the season, and they finished the season as the 4th best, and they were certainly in the running for. They could have won that day as well. That's how competitive they were. But we're missing 2 of our athletes. Kaylin Becken, she's in Spain with some other Perrysburg students, furthering her education and trying to reduce some Spanish classes that she might have to take at the high school. And Natalie Sanders is at orientation today. She's going to be attending the University of Chicago at Illinois, and UIC, I think is what they call it, but she is there today. But I do have 2 members of that team here, and I'll bring the first one up, Laura Vallette. Laura, if you could make your way up. Got a few things to say about Laura. Laura was our lead leg, so she led off the relay. And I've always believed in 31 years of coaching that you got to have someone leading off that can keep you in the race. At that level, if you're not in the race after the first leg, it's real tough to get in the race. And she certainly did that for us. She was 3rd or 4th through the first 2 laps when she handed the baton off, and we were in a great position. Laura had an incredible senior season. She came narrowly close to breaking the school record in the 400, which is a record that's stood for over 12 years. She was awfully close to that. She's going to be attending college at the University of Cal Berkeley. Was that what they call it? Wow. Okay, Cal Berkeley, yeah. Pretty impressive. she's someone that totally took advantage of the Perrysburg school experience. She was a salutatorian, and she excelled on the cross country and in track and field. So Laura Vallette, a heck of a career. And you can just stay here, and because I'm sure they'll want pictures with you and Ava. And next up, Ava Beeks. Ava, you can start coming on up. Ava was our anchor. So Laura led off, and our anchor was Ava. And I'm a firm believer that your anchor has to be someone that's willing to fight and willing to battle as hard as anyone, and Ava certainly has that characteristic. She also made it in the 1600, so as an individual, the 1600, some people call it the mile, it's just a tad short of the mile, but she finished 9th there, so she missed All-Ohio status by 1 place. But for those of you that know anything about running, she ran under 5 minutes this year multiple times. 4:56, was that the ultimate? 4:50. There might be there's probably one person in this room that can do that, and that's Anthony Clark. The rest of us nowhere close. Most of us would struggle to break 10 minutes, truly. Mr. Hosser, he could throw down probably a 7.5-minute mile, but anyways, Ava's ending her career, and I've been coaching here for 16 years, and we've had some really, really impressive female distance runners, but I can firmly say that she's the most decorated distance runner we've had in the program. She holds a school record in cross country. She's running the 17-minute range for cross country, and she this year broke the school record in the 1600, and she broke the school record in the 3200. And the crazy story about the 3200, she ran it once in her high school career, once, and she shattered the school record. So she's crazy talented. She will be first and running career at OU, and both of these young ladies were part of the best 4 years in cross country and track and field at Perrysburg High School. So congratulations to both of them.
Stay up here, yes. Please stay up here. I gotta move this up a little bit. But it is hard to follow the legend of John Mannheim. He's been in the business almost as long as Hall, but not quite. So, today for the boys track team, we are missing a couple people. Terry Cooper could not be here. He was a member of the 4x1 team. He was our anchor. He was one of those guys that you put him in the right spot, he has 4 guys to go hawk down, and he will run them down and win. He was definitely an exceptional talent. He has graduated and will be attending the Air Force, so he's joining them. He ended up in the times that are listed on the board minutes. They are from the regional. He ran a 21.8 in his final 200, which running 21 in the 200, it's amazing. It's fantastic. He did a great job. He finished 14th in the state. Also, we do not have Brody Ballman here. Brody Ballman, as many of you know, whatever he does, he just excels at. So a member of the state wrestling team and everything, which prior commitments from wrestling and whatnot has kept him away from us today. But still, he ran the 800. In the 800, he finished his last 800 this year running a 155. To give you an idea of how tight a race is, really between first and 8th place was less than a second. First and 16th place was basically 2 seconds. So that's 2 times around the track, which is quite impressive to have that tight of a group. He has had some amazing races in the past. His regional race, it looked like he was going to get boxed in and not qualify for states. And I asked him how he did it. He said, well, I just used a little wrestling move to use a forearm shiver and made it through. I was like, okay, that works. You know, whatever you need to do to make states, we do. The 4x1 team. So I have 3 of the members. I asked all 3 of them to come stand up here. So we have Dominic Gibson, Chris Purdy, and Quinn Dorzek. So the 4x1 relays, they are my favorite. They are the most fun event to watch, no matter if you're running a 4x8, 4x1, 4x2, 4x-mile. They are the most competitive, and you can see which teams really have like a lot of the top dogs, right? So some teams can have one that's really good, but when you make it state, you definitely have 4. So starting off here, we have Dominic Gibson. He is our leadoff. Just as John Meinheim said, you need someone that's going to take you out and win that lead. And Dominic here, he is the best at the starts. There's no one better on our team at getting out of the blocks. He always gets us the lead to that first handoff, which he, well, ended up handing off to Quentin. Quentin, one thing about Quentin, I keep on ragging on him a little bit because I would like him to do some indoor track to make sure that he gets in shape a little bit sooner. But as soon as he gets into shape, he's always right on the 4x1. He is always competing at the highest level, and he gets the handoff over to Chris Purdy. Chris Purdy, he does a very good job. He is my most trusted athlete. People don't realize how hard it is in a 4x1, how you have 30 meters to get a stick exchange. You think 30 meters, well, that's a long time. When you're running like 10 nines in 100, it's not a lot of time, okay? So he is one that this entire season, he never missed a handoff, and he always did his job getting it to our anchor quick enough so that we can go through and make it to states. Also, I do want to make mention of our alternates. We had 2 alternates, Jaden Villarreal, Darion Johnson. Both of them were very important to us this year because Dominic here, he had a little groin injury, so that happened in the 4x2 at districts, and the 4x1 goes after that. So we had to have Jaden Villarreal fill in for Dominic, and well, he allowed us to go on to regionals. Okay, then Darion at regionals, well, I gave him the shot to start in place, and he was able to allow us to get to finals at regionals, and then gave him enough time to heal up so we can get that extra little bit of time. Yeah. And then just make it onto state. So one thing I have to stress is that, you know, a lot of people see track as being an individual sport. The team matters most, okay? So everyone on my relay I used. Also, this year our 4x1 did break the school record. So we ran a 42.53, 58. So that's another record. Last year we broke the record also, so we were able to do that with a little bit different group, okay? Next up, we have Anthony Clark. Anthony Clark, I don't know, as soon as he came in as a freshman, you could tell that he was going to be a stellar athlete. He has been top in cross country and distance on track for us all 4 years. When we look at Anthony, he has that perfect build for a distance runner. This year for states, he finished with his 3,200 at 9:22. Which if you think about that, I mean, in essence, he's running basically 4:30s, 4:40 miles for 2 miles, which if you try and go out and run a 4:30 mile, I mean, I would die. I've never been a great distance runner. I've been always a sprinter more than anything, but still. When we look at Anthony Clark, he has had a lot of achievements for indoor track. He was at the indoor state meet. He also has competed in the 5,000 meter, which has always put down fantastic times. Your best time in the 3,200 was what, a 9:15? 9:16. Sorry, I was trying to make it look a little bit better. But Anthony is going to be continuing his running career over at Johns Hopkins, and we look forward to seeing what he does there. And that's who we have for our states.
Do a quick picture.
Ladies, there's seats up here if you want to have a seat. Sorry, it's back to the front.
So next, we're recognizing a team that their season just ended not all that long ago. So that's a very good thing, but probably still a little salty about that. So, but we're very excited that they're here to be recognized, and I hope as time goes on that they're able to appreciate another fantastic run, a second year in a row appearance in the Final Four in baseball. And so we're excited to recognize our baseball team, and Coach Hall will ask you to step up and introduce your team.
Come on up, guys. We have about half our kids here. Some guys are umpiring already. Some guys are at work. Some guys are at basketball camp. Assistant coaches are doing other things already. I'm going to have the kids each introduce themselves, and then I'll talk a little bit about the year. They'll say their name and their position.
Preston Ferris, and I'm a pitcher and first baseman.
I'm Brennan LaPointe, and I catch.
Tyler Palmer, and I was a pitcher and first baseman.
Landon Winters, left field.
Aaron Crowley, pitcher.
Ryan Reddig, second baseman, catcher.
Braxton Mefford, center field.
Noah Lindsay, shortstop.
Owen Mead, outfield.
Asher Lattimore, catcher.
Ben Miller, infield.
Hey, these were part of our we had 17 guys in the varsity. We had 3 players that were injured but were with us most of the year. We went 23-8. It was the second time, or the fourth time in school history that we made it to the Final Four, back-to-back years, which is incredibly hard to do. And I told the kids the other day on Saturday when we got beat that they'll appreciate it in 5 years how tough it is to go back-to-back. It's really, really hard to do. I've been doing this for a long time. To get there 4 times is really difficult. So they should be very, very proud of what they did. This is a team from the day go. We had injuries. We had kids step in. I don't know how many different combination of lineups we used this year until we found some people in the right combinations. We had guys step up and do some amazing things to do some things. We relied on pitching and defense. I think I look back today, we hit 234 in the tournament games, but our ERA was like under 2, and we didn't make errors. Like last year, we struggled for a week. At one point last year, we had a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, and this year we had a week like that. We were 0-4. We lost to the people across the river who we will never mention. We lost to Clay. We lost to another team in the state Final Four. And then we righted the ship. And all the TV guys were going, "Did you yell at them this year?" Because they knew I did last year. I go, "No. We just reasoned with them. They knew what they had to do. They turned around. They won 9 out of their last 10 games. Our last 2 weeks, we had backloaded our schedule. We played 7 teams that made it to the regionals in the last 2 weeks to get us ready. We ended up playing 5 of the teams that we played this year, made it to the state Final Four in their divisions. So we really beefed up the schedule. I don't know if anybody's ever played a tougher schedule than these guys. But they played together. I think they had fun. We had a couple kids that maybe were a little bit better than the others as far as stats are concerned, but we really didn't concern ourselves with this. We pitched by committee. We had 3 really good pitchers, and Aaron Banks, Tyler Palmer, and Preston Ferris. A.J. Crowley threw well for us. Petty's threw well for us. You know, we didn't have many complete games. We just pitched by committee. We had different guys step up and hit. Got runs when we needed to, and they just did a very, very good job. And we'd just like to thank you for recognizing us. And hopefully a three-peat would be nice.
Good.
Thanks.
No, you got it.
There, now they like each other. Smile.
As a former runner, I'm someone that always winces a little bit when people talk about team versus individual sports, because I do believe track is a team sport and how you support one another. But I think what the baseball team pulled out this year of coming together, I've been following y'all in the Sentinel Tribune, and there's been some great stories about kind of coming up from behind. So I think how you support one another, how your parents support you, the room that's filled here with parents. Congratulations, great teamwork, and we are expecting to see you back again next year. All right. At this time, we will take a 5-minute break, which gives people who want to leave a gracious exit. We will have public comment if there are any people signed up after this, but we will take a 5-minute break at 6:08. We will come back at 6:13. I'm going to call us back to order. We are at the time for public comment. I'll invite, we do have one person signed up who I'll invite to come to the microphone to speak. We ask that you share your name, address, if appropriate, group affiliation. Each person has a maximum of 3 minutes to speak per policy. Ms. Clark, we're going to ask you to the middle microphone. Yep. So you can speak directly to us, because you're speaking directly to us. These are comments on business items that we will be discussing or acting upon. And Ms. Clark, you've signed up for on 6.1 related to termination process for public employees. So.
Yep. So I'm Nikki Clark. I'm on Saddlehorn Drive. I'm a parent of the junior, going into high school now. And
Can you
was
give your full address, including your street?
the one that's written there, 24930
You just
Saddlehorn.
You wrote Saddlehorn.
Oh, sorry. Yep, 24930. Good evening. I'm here tonight to share a statement that reflects concerns raised by multiple community members, including individuals directly impacted by recent events in the district. These are not just my personal thoughts. They represent a shared call for transparency, accountability, and ethical leadership. Tonight's presentation on employee termination comes at a time when the district is also facing urgent challenges, including the difficulty of retaining qualified staff to support students. In this context, it's fair to ask how decisions are being prioritized and whether the balance between legal process and a workforce well-being is where it should be. When legal strategy starts to outweigh support for staff, it can give the impression, right or wrong, that the district is more focused on protecting itself than in serving its people. It is also worth noting that tonight's presenter, an attorney from Scott Scriven LLP, represents the same firm that has advised the district in recent internal matters involving staff conduct, student safety, and employee discipline. That continuity may seem efficient, but it raises fair questions about neutrality and oversight. When the same legal voices influence internal outcomes and later train the board on how to manage or justify those outcomes, it becomes hard to view those presentations as entirely impartial. In recent months, the district has used restrictive settlement language and confidentiality provisions that, even if technically legal, don't sit well with many in the community. These tactics do not build trust, they breed suspicion. And when the public is left with more secrecy than answers, confidence in leadership erodes. So I ask this board to reflect honestly. Who benefits from this particular attorney giving the presentation? Are we building long-term trust or just managing short-term risk? Are we choosing what's ethical or just what's legally defensible? Because the law is the floor, not the goal. Our students, staff, and families deserve leadership that aims for ethical ceilings. Ethical leadership begins with one question: what is the right thing to do, not just what can we get away with? Please consider that message is being sent tonight, and let that message be one of courage, integrity, and public trust. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no other people that have signed up for public comment, so at this time we will move to item 6, presentation on legal matters. Mr. Hassler, did you want to introduce
Sure.
me?
So with us, we have Julia Bauer, who is an attorney who specializes in school law. She works with several districts throughout the state. And we understand that there have been some questions that have come up in terms of the process that school districts must follow when it comes time to discuss discipline and termination. And you know, this question has been something that the community has, you know, asked about. It's a question that is not that easily explained in terms of, well, why do districts respond this particular way or that particular way when something happens? And we wanted to take a moment to do kind of a mile-high view of what are the laws that govern, because one of the things that we heard throughout, you know, conversations, and we really leaned into conversations about staff and discipline. And one of the things that we heard were statements like, if this were my company, this is how we would handle these things. And it's really from that piece, that conversation, that led us to, well, how do we explain the differences between what happens in your company and what has to happen in a school setting? It's a fair question, and it's one that we've spent a lot of time kind of discussing, and we felt that it would be very helpful to have someone come in and explain that difference, because it has been a question we've heard from the community, and we're reacting to that feedback. So we appreciate the time that you have, today, and want to share with you the presentation, and we're grateful that you're here this evening. So welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening, board members. I'm happy to be here to talk to you this evening. Obviously, we are in public session, so the communications that we are going to have right now are not subject to the attorney-client privilege. So I'm not going to address any of the particular situations that have come up, but in conversation with Tom or Mr. Hassler, we've had a conversation about, let's talk about the big picture. What does the process look like? How is the statute structured so that you guys have a sense of what it takes when it comes to teacher termination in Ohio? And so I'm going to focus mostly on kind of general information, some cases, and give you some trends so that you have a sense of where the case law is when it comes to termination. I've been with Scott Scriven now for 17 years, 18 years. And before that, I was with the Ohio School Boards Association, with many of you have maybe gone to some trainings through them. So I've been doing school law for 20 years. I worked with actually this district I looked up today. My first email with Mr. Hassler was in 2013. So it's been 12 years of a good relationship working with the district and helping to navigate complex legal issues, including collective bargaining and labor and employment matters. If you could move next, yeah, perfect. So we're going to talk about at-will versus contract employment today. We're going to talk about the teacher termination process, some of the challenges to that process, some collateral issues and costs, and then some accountability and alternatives to termination. So let's start with at-will employment. At-will employment is when the employer and the employee can terminate employment at any time, with some exceptions for any lawful reason. And so most private sector employment in Ohio is going to be at will. And so the burden of termination is pretty low in an at-will scenario. Contrast that with contract employment, which is the status for almost every school employee is going to have an employment contract of some sort. Even substitute employees have employment contracts. And those contracts restrict the employer and the employee's ability to terminate the employment relationship subject to the terms of the contract, and then in some instances subject to the terms of the statute. So with just a few exceptions, like I said, most school employees are going to be subject to those contract requirements. We're going to spend a lot of time talking today about the Ohio Revised Code Section 3319-16, which is the teacher termination statute. But I will point out that that statute actually applies to a broader group than just teachers. That applies to all administrators. That applies to your speech language pathologists, your other certified employees in the district. And it also applies to the superintendent and the treasurer, coaches. So lots and lots of different types of employees are covered by this statute, although it really is considered to be the teacher termination statute. And so basically that statute says that in order to terminate the contract of an employee, you need to have good and just cause. And good and just cause does not have a definition in the statute. It is defined over time on a case-by-case basis, taking into account the totality of the circumstances. The courts have said it is a relatively high hurdle. You will hear sometimes that it was an arbitrator decision or a hearing officer decision will say, this is the economic death penalty, this is a career ender when you terminate someone, and so it needs to be a fairly serious matter. It needs to be something significant, not minor misconduct. And the standard, basically from a hearing officer and a court's perspective, is you need to be able to prove that the alleged conduct happened, but then you also need to be able to prove that the substance of that conduct is so significant that it merits termination. So it's almost a two-step process there. We have to prove the facts, and then we also have to prove the significance of those facts. So I have a couple of case studies for you. I'm going to give you a quiz, and we'll see if anybody wants to volunteer. I've changed the names here to initials just to protect the individuals involved. So PT was a teacher at Dayton Public from 2003 to 2016, serving as an intervention specialist. In the 15-16 school year, she actually was disciplined for misconduct, so suspended for 10 days. Which is a pretty significant suspension that's usually viewed as a precursor to termination. And she was assigned to teach a new life skills class. After the administrators went in and observed her in the classroom, they determined she's not doing the essential functions of the classroom teacher. She's not teaching these students this course. She's not cooperating with building administrators and other staff who are trying to get her to assist or trying to assist her in meeting her job responsibilities. She called a fellow staff member a devil and criticized them, and then she also failed to provide interim grades and third quarter grades for her students. So at that point, the board takes the step to initiate termination for those 4 things that are listed there in the bullet points. So what do you think? Do we have good and just cause? Anyone willing to guess?
Well, I feel like we're supposed to say no. I mean, it sounds like that would be a good cause to terminate, but I feel like I'm being set up. So.
Fair point. So if you go to the next slide, Tom, here's what the hearing officer said. He said that either the district did not prove the facts or did not prove the significance of the facts for those first 3 things. So the failure to perform the essential functions, the hearing officer said, yeah, she tried to get help, but they never helped her, and it really wasn't her fault. She wasn't doing the things she was supposed to be doing. And it was a new class, and she wasn't really given enough guidance or support, and so we're not gonna find that to be good and just cause. Same with the building administrators not accepting the help of the people who are reaching out to help her, and the same with the devil and the criticism comment. But what the hearing officer did say is that failure to complete interim grades and failure to complete third quarter grades was good and just cause. So he threw everything out but the grades. Ultimately, that was appealed to a trial court, so a court of common pleas, and then finally to an appeals court, which was ultimately affirmed. And so you can see there the case. So you can see a hearing officer, their judgment oftentimes will be deferred to by the higher courts, but they certainly have the ability to reverse a decision if they want to. Let's move to the next one. So this is DF. She was a kindergarten teacher for 17 years, so a long-term employee. She had consistently received high ratings for her job performance, and she had no previous disciplinary issues. In 2017, she had a student, a kindergarten student, so a 5-6-year-old, who was having escalating behaviors and was engaging in some refusal behavior and decided to just sit down in the hallway and would not move, would not return to class. So she actually dragged the student, and I'm using the words that they use in the court case, she dragged the student by his arm down the hallway to her classroom, 126 feet. What do we think? Good and just cause?
That one, not as much ambiguity. Dragged 126 feet, I'd say yes.
You would think, but let's go to the next slide. So that's the hearing officer's decision. Yes, there was good and just cause, but the Court of Common Pleas in Cincinnati reversed it and said that that teacher should be reinstated with back pay. And they found basically she's a long-term employee. There had been no prior discipline. There had been no prior issues. She had good ratings on her evaluations and was otherwise well regarded as a teacher, and the student wasn't injured. And they found that to be very persuasive.
Julia, how long, for like this case study, how long did it actually take to get this far?
That I think, well, in 2017 is when termination was initiated, and you can see that the decision there is a 2020 case, so 3 years. So certainly she would have received some significant award of back pay at the trial court level, because by that point in time she probably had been gone for at least a year, if not longer. Next one, please. So this is an interesting case of moonlighting. So this teacher was accused of falsifying sick leave and was required to meet with some administrators regarding the excessive nature of her sick leave. She was a science teacher and teaching advanced science courses, and the district was having trouble finding qualified substitutes to take her classes during her excessive absences. And throughout the process, they find out that she was teaching at a local college. Lots and lots of teachers were doing that in the area. It was very common to teach a community college class in the evenings. But they noticed that the pattern of her sick leave was often the day of her class and the day after. And so they said, you know, it looks like you're taking off time to prep for your evening class and then taking off time the next day to prep. We're concerned that this is a pattern of sick leave abuse. And so she said, actually, I didn't teach at the community college on those 4 nights. I actually called off there too. So the district actually investigated and said, no, she didn't. She never called off. She didn't show up and she didn't teach like she was required to teach, but she didn't actually call off. So she was actually paid to teach at a community college on an hourly basis when she was not actually there. And so they actually initiated the process to terminate her because of the misconduct at her second job. So what do you think about that one?
I think she should have been terminated because you can prove where she was, you can prove where she wasn't, and obviously it's affecting the students for her not being there.
Right, and the community college was a public college, so she was accepting public money for work that she never performed.
Depend on the
and
contract.
so that was what the hearing officer determined. It was good and just cause. So this one I think is a closer case. You could see this one going the other way. It's a job that is not her primary position, had nothing to do with her teaching role at the school, other than the fact that that sick leave pattern. But ultimately the hearing officer did find good and just cause here, and there were no further appeals in this case. So I think what that can show you is that you can, when you're looking at a standard that is somewhat vague and evolves over time on a case-by-case basis, you have some amount of subjectivity and some risk that someone will not see it the same way that the administration does or the same way that the board does. There are some general trends that we can pull out from the statute and the case law. And so one of them is the next slide, Tom. It is committing crimes related to school activity. So typically speaking, when somebody is charged with and convicted of a crime that is related to school activity, that is going to be good and just cause. Now, what's interesting about this is that there's a time component associated with many of these cases. So oftentimes, by the time these cases reach a court of appeals level, which I think actually 3 of the 4 of those are court of appeals levels, we often know how the criminal process has played out, whether that person was found guilty or whether they have pled guilty. And so on the front end, when there is a crime committed or a crime alleged, it can be difficult to know how that is ultimately going to resolve itself. Because under the criminal process, you are innocent until proven guilty. And so there is definitely a time lag that gets involved sometimes with some of these cases. But you can see inappropriate sexual misconduct with students, failure to report known or suspected abuse, driving under the influence when it's tied to some school activity, all have been found to be good and just cause. The conduct does need to be related back to school activity generally from the court's perspective. So you see the last case there, failure to stop at a minor vehicle accident and being cited for the traffic crime associated with that was found not to be sufficient grounds. Another big trend is insubordination. So when we have willful disobedience of or refusal to obey a reasonable and valid rule, that can very frequently lead to a finding of good and just cause. Typically what we want to see is written directives, written rules, something in writing saying do not do this exact thing, and then the person willfully does the exact thing. And so that is good evidence that you would want in an insubordination case. So I've got a couple examples of insubordination cases up there, including the freshwater case that now it's been 10, 12 years. It's not as prominent in people's minds as it was, but that case dragged on for many, many years. And there was a lot of media coverage of that case, so people are often familiar with it. But ultimately, what was the thing that tripped up Mr. Freshwater was failing to abide by the specific directives that he was given to do some of the things that he felt that he had the First Amendment right to do. The next one is academic misconduct. So when we have evidence of academic misconduct, so giving students answers on tests, repeatedly failing to administer standardized tests properly, and then also failing to provide grades that were due for graduating seniors were all these cases. So another grades case, any of those types of academic misconduct that's so central to what a teacher is required to do, that those tend to be found to be good and just cause. As I mentioned before, there's a great deal of subjectivity with these standards. So I put some examples here where there's cases that have been found to lack good and just cause. So a teacher falsifies sick leave, claiming to be ill while actually on a family vacation, mishandling public money with regard to the athletic concession and yearbook funds, actually viewing sexually explicit content on a laptop was found not to be good and just cause. And another scenario where a teacher left a classroom, and while the teacher was gone and not observing the students, one student assaulted another and I believe actually caused that student to pass out. So it was a pretty significant assault. And that teacher was found to have made essentially an innocent mistake of walking out the room. How would that teacher have possibly known that that was going to happen while they were gone was basically the gist of that case. So no good and just cause for all of those cases. So I wanted to give you just kind of a sample of some of the substantive trends and also some of the examples of some places where it seems like maybe it should have been good and just cause and it wasn't. And then also some examples that are kind of on the other side where we have minor misconduct in that moonlighting job, which seems not as significant as some of the other things that we've talked about. Now I'm going to talk about what the process looks like. So termination under the statute is required to follow a very strict path. The very first thing that happens is the employee is given notice of the allegations against them and an opportunity to respond in a pre-disciplinary meeting with the administration. Then, after that, there is a board resolution that has to be adopted in public session that outlines the specifics of what the teacher is accused of doing. After that board adopted resolution, the teacher can then request a hearing either before the board or a referee. And the referee would be appointed by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. After that demand, then the hearing is supposed to happen within 30 days. It never happens that quickly, just given everyone's schedules. And sometimes it's 30 days before we even know who the hearing officer appointed by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce is. Then the hearing occurs, and at that hearing, the board has to provide a court reporter and a transcript as part of the statute. So they have to pay for that court reporter. They have to pay for the hearing officer's time, which the hearing officers, the referees appointed by the Ohio Department of Education, are attorneys who are in private practice who do this kind of work and hold administrative hearings on behalf of the department. The hearing witnesses have to be called because, like I said, we have the burden of proof as the school district to prove the facts. So we have to bring in witnesses to demonstrate that the factual allegations are true. And then there are post-hearing briefs that are submitted describing the conduct and the legal standards and why the standard meets the termination standard. Ultimately, there's a decision from the hearing officer through the referee, and that decision comes back to the board to either accept or reject. Either accept the recommendations of the referee, and then if you do, and the referee recommends that the person not be terminated, then they are reinstated with back pay. And the record of that decision is actually expunged under the statute. If the board disagrees with the findings of the hearing officer, then they adopt a second public resolution outlining all of the reasons why the board disagrees with the hearing officer's decision. And that then becomes the final order of termination. That process itself can take 9 to 12 months. And then at that point in time, once that final order is issued by the board, it can be appealed to the Court of Common Pleas, which is the lowest trial court level in our court system in Ohio. That decision can then be appealed to the Court of Appeals, which is the second level, and then ultimately to the Ohio Supreme Court. So as you can imagine, that can be a lengthy process. Some of the challenges that districts have with this process, one, like I said, the burden of proof is on the board, so you have to prove your case by preponderance of substantial, reliable, and probative evidence. That means we have to have witnesses, we have to have evidence. One of the most challenging things from my perspective is child witnesses. I never want to put a child in a position of having to be cross-examined by counsel for the employee if I can avoid it. That's a really, really tough position, particularly a vulnerable student who has been through something difficult. That is something that always is in the back of our mind when we're thinking about, do we want to go forward with this process? The other piece of it is if a family decides that they don't want their child to participate, then we would have to go get a subpoena to force that child to testify, which again is not a position. You guys are in public education not because you want to do that to children. I'm an attorney representing public education entities, and I don't want to do that either if we can avoid it. Witness credibility is another thing that happens. Some witnesses are incredibly effective when you're in a prep room, meeting with them and talking with them about what happened. And then as soon as you get it on the record in a court setting with a hearing officer or a judge, if you're at the appeal stage, they become less credible. Their story becomes less convincing. They forget things because it's a challenge to have to testify in these situations. The other thing that is a challenge for districts too is it's just a time commitment. There is a public hearing option under this process where the board would actually have to do the hearing, which can be incredibly time consuming. And I note up there that the freshwater hearing involved 38 days of witness testimony. So just to give you a sense of how involved some of these cases can be and the length of time and effort that goes into them. Documentation, I mentioned before with insubordination, we typically want to have documentation. We also want to have progressive discipline if we have it. Like I mentioned in that other case earlier about the teacher who dragged the student, the hearing officer and the court went to great lengths to say she's a good teacher, she's well regarded, she's well evaluated, she's had no other disciplinary action. And so I think those things matter when you're talking about something that can end a career to many, many hearing officers and judges. There's procedural hurdles. We have rules of evidence and rules of civil procedure that could determine what evidence gets in. And then ultimately, it is a very lengthy process. As Mr. Dreher pointed out, their freshwater was 7 years. The Katz v. Maple Heights case was the one where the teacher falsified sick leave. That was 4 years to complete. And then Speller was one of the other examples I gave, was 3.5 years up to the Court of Appeals level. I think the last challenge we have is just the general unpredictability of the person making the decision. Because the standard is an evolving standard and is determined on a case-by-case basis. When there are close cases, reasonable minds can disagree. Certainly reasonable minds, if there is one person saying something happened and the other person saying no, it didn't, ultimately a hearing officer and a court are going to decide who's telling the truth in those scenarios. So when you have disputed facts, you always have the possibility that one person will be believed and the other person not. And so there's always the possibility of reasonable minds varying. And then you also have the possibility that you have one decision at one level that gets overturned at another because, again, reasonable minds can disagree about the outcome. With contested teacher terminations, we typically have collateral legal claims that come along with that. So once somebody has decided that they would prefer to fight back and go through the hearing process, knowing it's just as onerous and lengthy on their side as it is on the board side, oftentimes they are wanting to redeem their reputation or they're wanting to redeem themselves, and they will file a claim for defamation. There's 2 board adopted resolutions that are part of this process, and so they will say that the board defamed them in one of those resolutions. You are a government entity, and so you have all kinds of constitutional claims that can be made, including procedural and substantive due process, wrongful termination, unemployment claims typically come with this. And then we just have various procedural claims that can be made about violations of the statute or the unlawful reduction in salary by putting somebody on a unpaid suspension, discrimination, retaliation, breach of contract, malicious breach of contract, breach of the duty to report. They will often attach defamation to the report that gets made to the state about the misconduct, and then oftentimes grievances as well. So we are fighting on multiple fronts whenever these claims are actually contested, typically. Finally, costs, legal fees for the termination and any collateral legal claims. Sometimes there is insurance coverage for that, sometimes there is not. As I mentioned, by statute, the bulk of the costs of that initial hearing are borne by the board. So the cost of the hearing officer, the cost of the transcript. The other big thing that comes with all of this is back pay. And so if you take the 2 steps to start the termination process and have somebody on an unpaid suspension pending the outcome of that termination process, they are accruing a back pay from the first day that they're unpaid. And so if it ultimately there is a decision later on in the process, the reinstatement with back pay is the outcome. There is an existing accountability system in the state. Because I often hear, if we don't take this step, people won't know that this happened. And the state has taken care of that, and by and large, with a new, I guess it's not new, it's from 2008, an accountability system that requires school districts, boards of education, administrators to report educators who engage in misconduct or engage in criminal activity. And so the next slide talks about the various different points at which there is a duty on the board or the administration to report. So it's whenever somebody has committed a criminal offense and there's been actually a court finding about that. Whenever the board initiates termination or non-renewal based on somebody committing what's known to be conduct and becoming the education profession. If an employee resigns or retire because that is threatened, so we are going to terminate you unless you resign. And same with during an investigation into conduct and becoming. And finally, they just added in the last 2 years this substitute removal process. If somebody is removed from your eligible list, they have to be reported. And when an employee is arrested, indicted, or summoned for certain crimes, you have a duty to suspend them from all duties involving the care, custody, and control of children, and then a duty to report that. So this accountability system has made significant changes in the process of holding educators accountable, making sure that future employers are aware of the conduct. Ultimately, what can happen at the state level is that someone's license can be revoked or failed to be renewed because of those conduct charges. Those documents then are required to be in the employee's personnel file, so if a future employer requests their personnel file, there should be a misconduct report in there that describes all the things that were reported, and it has to stay there until the state acts. So there are some accountability measures in process to help with the situation of not holding somebody accountable at that stage. And I think, it's anecdotal, but the result of that has been significantly fewer contested termination cases. On behalf of our clients, we represent 150 school districts statewide, and so we see fewer and fewer contested teacher terminations at the board level, because typically what is happening is they're saving their case for the state level. And so they would rather not make a record at the local level, they would rather make their record about their license. And where they have subpoena power, where they have a little bit more of an advantage potentially from a litigation standpoint. And so that has been a trend that we see frequently now. When the termination process is started, we get calls from the other side saying, we want to resign. Can we work out a resignation agreement for that reason? Because we are going to contest this with the state. And so that's pretty common now. As far as looking at this process from most of my clients' perspective, why a resignation or a separation agreement is sometimes appealing in those scenarios where the employee is offering to resign is that you don't have the hearing, you don't have the uncertainty of that process, you don't have to re-traumatize witnesses and bring in people to testify about what occurred. And so it is finality about the process to ensure that that person that we felt so significantly should not be continuing as a teacher is no longer with our students. And we know it for sure. They won't be reinstated, they won't get back pay. That is an outcome that is certain that they won't be here with our kids anymore. And so that oftentimes is an appealing route for those reasons. Are there any general questions I can answer about that?
I appreciate you sharing kind of what you have shared with this board and past boards. 17 years you've been doing this. I'm going to underline, punctuate kind of the last part that you said there. The goal, the motivation is always to expeditiously take care of these issues as we come across them so that they're not within the care and custody of our children in a manner that is as, I think I already used the word expedient, but at the best outcome, the best risk management outcome for the district and for the taxpayers at the most effective cost too, because for me, there's a dollars and cents side to this as well. Was wondering, you said you do 150. You have 150 school districts out of this roughly 600. Mm-hmm. It's about 25%. Mm-hmm. Of those 150, or do you have an over/under, an order of magnitude? How many of those districts deal with these type of employment issues? Is it just one, that one being Perrysburg, or do you see it broader across the state?
No, we deal with employee misconduct every day in districts from Cleveland to Cincinnati, Toledo to the river. I mean, all over the state. And so it is something that is kind of a day-to-day occurrence in our practice where we get a call and say, we have to deal with this employee. How do we handle this process? What's the statute require? What's our labor agreement require? And we're navigating that process. I actually tried to get you guys some good data from the Department of Education and Workforce because they're the ones who appoint these hearing officers. So I thought surely they'll have all the decisions, right? And that they could tell us like what has been the trend, how many decisions have there been in the last few years, and they don't have it. They are just appointing the hearing officers, but they're not collecting final decisions from any of them. So they couldn't give me that information, and that's really the only entity I think that could track that. But like I said, I do think anecdotally we have seen a decrease in contested hearings over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Some of that is probably the economy too. People have other options. People can choose to say, you know what, I'm not going to be a teacher anymore. I'm going to go work in the private sector. This isn't what I want to do anyway. And so there's some of that, I think, that's probably a factor in that too.
Thank you.
Sure.
I know you mentioned hearing officers, and they get appointed, and they're usually practicing attorneys or retired. Is there any, what other information about these folks that make these decisions, as you gear up for these kind of hearings?
So there's a handful of ones that have been appointed over and over and over again so that you can find some decisions. Many of them do arbitration hearings as well, so there are private databases that we have access to that we can pull those decisions so you can have a sense of what those decisions are. You typically get a list of 3, and then with you and opposing counsel have to pick somebody off of that list of 3. And usually the strategy is trying to pick somebody who's knowledgeable and experienced about the public education setting, because it is a unique setting when it comes to employment, and so you want somebody who understands. I once had an arbitration with an arbitrator who'd never been on a school bus, and I thought, I wish he had that in his resume, because being on a school bus is a unique experience, and you understand the loudness and the volume of the vehicle and the stops. Like there's a part of life that you understand that if you've never been on a school bus, you might not get some of the nuances of why it matters so much that students are in their seats and that there is a level of decorum that's happening. So we do try to find as much out about them as we can, but there are definitely better ones than others, like any decision makers, that we try to avoid or that we try to pick.
Julie, you might be able to comment on this, but I think Mr. Christie, we've done some research trying to get information from the state on, filings of misconduct, what the numbers, who, and other details, and it's like a black hole, right, Don? We can't get any information. So if something gets submitted on our behalf, it goes into that black hole, and it's no longer subject to public records. We've done our own public records requests to the Department of Education and been denied. So we talk about transparency. We're covered, but not necessarily the Department of Education.
Yeah. The state board, through their licensure process and through their discipline process, it is completely confidential until there's a final determination. So until you get to a point where a hearing officer has issued a decision and made a recommendation to the State Board of Education, or until there's a consent agreement, so many people who are accused of misconduct with regard to their license will enter into an agreement with the state, similar to the separation agreement thing that we're talking about, where they say, I will keep my license under these circumstances if I do these certain things, or I will give up my license in order to not have to pursue this process anymore, and I'm going to go get another career. And so there's until you get to that final stage, the entire process is confidential by law.
Legislatively, has there been much discussion about changing this process so it is more like private sector? Because that's something that we hear quite a bit.
I have not seen anything on 331916 since Senate Bill 5, and that was in 2011. And, there is some context when you look through the case law of wanting to make sure that at the end of the day there is a process and procedure and accountability and due process for employees. And so I think the intention of this statute, well, I know it is because it was in response to some litigation, but the intention was to make sure that if we are going to terminate people, that it's for solid reasons and it's not a trumped up charge because you gave my son an F last year in his advanced AP class, and so I'm unhappy with you, and so I am going to go after you for that reason, that there isn't an arbitrary or minor disagreement like that would lead to somebody losing their career. But I haven't seen anything in years trying to change this process.
I think it's interesting you bring up that point too about why isn't it as easy as it is in the private sector. As somebody that deals with employment issues constantly in the private sector, that is one of the things that's in my vertical. It's not as straightforward as you think. There are boomerang impacts. You've got to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row there as well. So I'm going to give the impression, I mean, absolutely right, contract is much, much, much harder than at-will, but at-will isn't a no-brainer.
No,
type of
and
action
we
either.
work with private sector employers
you do,
too.
yeah.
And so, I mean, we oftentimes, as part of that process, the private sector employer is telling us, go get a resignation, because we would like finality, certainty. We don't want a discrimination claim. We don't want this toxic person in our
Want that
workplace
agreement
anymore.
signed and in hand.
We want this done, resolved, predictable. Here's a budget. Oftentimes in the private sector, they'll say, here's how much money you can spend on that settlement, because we would like the finality, and it's worth it to us for that dollar amount.
Julie, I just want to emphasize, and you commented that you have a slide on this, but just because the board comes up with a separation agreement or a resignation does not stop our accountability to report.
No. There's very few scenarios where an employee would separate from employment because of misconduct and not be reported. And it's in those rare circumstances where you have school employees who are no longer licensed, and that group gets smaller every day. But there's certain people who work in schools who don't have to have a license from the state board, and so we have no duty to report their misconduct to the state board because they have no jurisdiction over them.
I'm still processing some of this. I find it interesting that I think the other thing that is really different is the fact that there is just one person in each step of this, for the most part, making the decision. And that, that is a judgment call by one person, whether it's the referee or the hearing officer or the judge, that it's going to be based on that one person's opinion of the information presented. And that's a little different than I think kind of what we expect in a process like this. So that's really helpful to hear about. Any other questions or?
Well, thank you for your time and dialogue this evening.
Thank you very
Thanks
much
for coming, Julia.
Taking the time to do this. Appreciate it. We'll move to 7 with the superintendent's reports.
All right. Certainly, we're kind of wrapping up the recognitions for this past school year, so it was great to see the teams here this evening. Also, just wanted to highlight at the end of the year some pretty, some very nice recognition for some of our artists here at Perrysburg High School, and we have some of the winners here with the advanced painters and ceramic students. Received awards from Historic Perrysburg, and they have their pieces on display at Way Library. So when we were having our listening tour events at Way Library, the students, this artwork was on display, so we're able to kind of check it out. And you can see a few of the pictures there of some of those items. So some very talented work here. So speaking of the district dialogues, we have the next one is June 24th. And it's a state of the schools and a look back at the school year. And then, of course, we have a topic, and then it's open for anyone to drop in. So you don't have to come just for that reason. If you have a question or something that you'd like to talk about, if you time it, you'll hear a presentation. I think Randy and I are tag teaming this one. But if you come a little bit late, you can miss that and then share with us what is on your mind. So, and again, that will be from 11 to 12 at Way Library. So we appreciate them opening up their facility for us. And I know it's very easy to get to for the community. And I know that's why the district chose it. So continuing the theme, jacket moments that matter. At the end of the year, a lot of, reflection on the school year and talking about, the impact that our staff and teachers have on our students. And it's great that the district takes that spotlight and shows all the wonderful things that are happening and amplifying those messages from families, from parents, about their experiences. So whether it be a classroom teacher or an activity or a secretary, everybody has an opportunity to be recognized. So that's very exciting to see that, all the great things that are being posted about that. I know there was some news about a state representative representing House District 44, lives in Sylvania Township, demanding that there be tracking and maintaining of records on the immigration status of each Perrysburg student. So he sent a letter, said he sent a letter in his press release to me, demanding these things. We did respond to that, and I think that the full response is available on our landing page on the district website. The first thing that I pointed out is that we never received a letter. So his office apologized for that, but media release, public release, and we had never received that letter, and so but we did take time and respond to it. I think the other thing that we pointed out is that, as a criminal defense attorney and a public official, as Representative Williams is, he certainly understands the federal, state, and constitutional protections that are afforded to students in public schools. And in my response, I kind of highlight some of those cases and some of the federal law that guides how we have to react in certain situations that he is requesting us. So to comply with your request would not only be unlawful, but fundamentally contrary to legal obligations entrusted to schools. So the court and different laws that have been passed federally were kind of highlighted in that. So just wanted to circle back to that. And so with that, I know that Board President Roland Miller did respond, and I know that was published as well. So, and I just wanted to take a moment and talk about the cost of financial uncertainty, because we're going to move into a portion of the board, discussions at this meeting are going to be centered around, financial matters here, and what's happening in Columbus, what may happen in Columbus, and what that impact is locally. And as the district weighs, as the board weighs, what steps it should take to kind of stabilize our financial situation. It creates kind of a cloud of uncertainty in terms of, well, what will the district do? What will the board ask voters to do? And what will their reaction be? And we wanted to highlight a couple of things that are really impacting people's decisions about being in Perrysburg because of this financial uncertainty. So we had a teacher candidate who declined a job offer to teach at Perrysburg High School and lived in the area and decided to take a position at a high school in Sandusky County, so they'll be commuting. A Perrysburg High School English teaching position received 5 applications and interviews, and that selection process is underway. Last year for the same position, we had 22 applicants. And for the same position, going back to 21-22 school year, we had 31 applicants. Foreign language, we had 2 applicants with only 1 that had the right licensure. We had a science teaching position at Perrysburg High School, received 5 applicants for it, with 1 holding the specific license that we needed. And in 2022-2023, there were 19 for that position. We had 3 teachers that were unfortunately laid off. And because of the retirements, and we talked about that at the last board meeting, the additional retirements, we were able to ask, we didn't restore their positions, but we were able through the retirements to ask them if they wanted to come back and take someone else's position. And 3 individuals said no, that they had accepted jobs in other districts and were going to stay there. And then most recently, we have the Toth principal vacancy. We had it posted, monitoring the number of applicants. Wanted a little bit deeper pool of applicants, and we reposted. We had a total of 8 applicants for that position, and we had 5 candidates that we were going to interview with a building committee and administrators, teachers, and a parent. And 2 of the 5 canceled within 24 hours of the interview. So we've reposted and beginning to look at a new deadline and filling that position. So when we talk about the impact the reductions are making when it comes to the student experience, you can look at the reduction list and point to the Key Club not coming back or this program going away. But I think it's also to take a moment to kind of pause and highlight the fact that there's other implications that also carry with that uncertainty. So as the board moves forward with its discussions about what it needs to kind of stabilize the patient financially, it's important. It's important to what we do and what we expect. So that's it for that June report.
And like Tom's teeing up the next one, just think about this. The struggles for staff and the amount of applicants, it's a market economy, right? So when we try to contain costs, it's just like anything else. If you have 10 qualified applicants versus 1, you get an idea what happens to the potential cost to fill a position.
So this is our monthly student safety and staff accountability update. Again, we've made the decision to have a commitment to transparency and action, 2 certainly very important factors as we talk about this topic. And we continue to take significant steps to enhance that student protections, increase transparency, and improve how we're reporting and documenting. Since the last month's board meeting, we did meet on June 10th. As we have met every month, we have multiple individuals who receive reports, to the tip lines, and meeting to review those that have come in or the progress or updates on those that have already been received. So since that last meeting, we had that take place on June 10th. We also have begun to talk with our attorneys about public records requests regarding this information. So as you can imagine, it's complicated. So as a public institution, there are very few things that are exempt from public records. So people say transparency, and we want transparency. There are very few institutions that have to be, by law, as transparent as public schools. And there are very few things that are excluded from that. When you're talking about a particular student, when you're talking about discipline, when you're talking about a student's educational record, all of those kinds of things are exempt. So the nature of these complaints, we're asking legal counsel to help us go through those to determine what are the things that have to be released, and then what are the things that can be redacted legally. And so we're very worried about this, how it would be perhaps shared out in the public and having a chilling effect on the work that we're doing as a district, which I think is very valuable in following through on many of these reports. To have individuals who make a report and then maybe perhaps see their name pop up in a social media post is a concern of ours. So we'll have more to share with that information, but that is something that has come up here in the last month that we're working with our legal counsel on that. So, and again, these high-level reports we've been sharing, every report we've been receiving, giving a synopsis of those in a way that protects students' identities, so that's very important to us. So we've had 2 reports since May 19th. Actually, the first report was received on Friday, I believe it was May 16th, so it wasn't logged on the report at the time that we were prepared to share this with the Board of Education on the 19th. And it was a complaint over alleged staff use using a cell phone on their job. So that matter, we did refer to the anonymous information to the building principal where the allegedly took place. The second report was received on May 19th, so as we're heading into the board meeting. It wasn't a specific complaint regarding a staff member, but concern over some end-of-the-year school activity games at an elementary building. It's kind of like a field day where kids go out and have all these different kinds of activities, and someone was concerned about one of those and brought it to our attention, shared it with the building, and they said, yeah, we cannot do that activity, and so that was it. So we've always highlighted a breakdown reports regarded to Mr. Henline. So since February 19th, there haven't been any additional ones. But what we wanted to do is take a moment to just kind of summarize and review this past semester, the 6 months that we've been doing this, and kind of a breakdown of those. So you can see here a breakdown of the number of tips, reports that were filed each month, and then how many have been closed. And closed, as I just shared those two examples, both of those cases are closed. There was a report that someone was allegedly using their cell phone while they're doing their work. That information was shared to the principal. That case is closed. They will follow up, they'll investigate, and address it. Given the anonymous nature of the report, there isn't anybody we can follow up with. And the other case closed, took the information, had a meeting, reflected with the building leadership, and made a change and conveyed that back to that person. So looking a little bit deeper, when you look at the number of complaints that we had in January, February, the majority of complaints that were there in that first month, as we shared publicly in February, had to deal with reports regarding Henline. And then you can see kind of where the rest of this time where these reports fell. So by month. When you do a little bit more analysis, there were 17 staff members that were specifically named in these reports. We had 3 reports that listed multiple people. Actually, 10 of the 17 staff members came from 3 emails where there was kind of a buckshot of staff members' names. So again, we are taking these reports seriously and documenting and following up. So if someone lists, like in one case, here are 4 or 5 different staff members I think you need to look at, that ended up in this tally, and it's something that we did follow up on.
I'm sorry, you said 17 staff members came from how many?
There were 17 that were mentioned by name in this 6-month period, and 10 of them came from 3 emails.
Of them came from 3. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So somebody who says, here are 4 names that you need to look into. Here are 3 names you need to look into. So that's where one email can generated a number.
Thank you.
2 of the cases were referred to law enforcement. 11 cases you heard Julia talk about references to the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, how that is an important tool in dealing with student or staff conduct. And so we had 11 cases that were referred there for them to review. When you look at the 32 cases, only 1 was referred to law enforcement only. 11 cases, again, were office professional conduct. 2 cases were referred to both law enforcement and the department. 14 cases involved some kind of a referral either to the police or Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. And 18 cases, like the 2 that I just mentioned, didn't result in a police referral or a referral down to the Ohio Department of Education. It was something that we were able to address or close. There were 11 Henline-related, of the 11 Henline-related reports, 2 were referred to law enforcement. So when you start looking at, what kind of reports were referred to where, how many were just about Mr. Henline, 10 were referred to the Office of Professional Conduct. So again, 11 cases were referred to ODE, 10 of those were regarding Mr. Henline. And one of the 2 cases referred to law enforcement, well, 2 of them were referred to, and then one was both, so ODE and law enforcement. So you can kind of see a breakdown where the majority of those kind of reports, were referred to Mr. Henline. So again, I think one of the things that is important is every month we have taken time, like we have this evening, to share what came in, to break down an explanation of where things are. And then today we took it a step further and said, here's what's happened in the last 6 months. So again, it's our actions we want people to see. We want them to see how serious we're taking these matters. And one of the questions that has come up is, has the district done anything? Since January, when all of this hit, that first meeting at the high school, what has the district done? And so we wanted to take a moment to kind of break it into some large areas where we focused on things. So reporting and transparency, we launched this tip line, which gives students and families, community members, another opportunity to report. We have monthly internal reviews where these reports are going to multiple people, so it's not going to just that one person. There is that checks and balances, which was certainly, that's very important to what we heard. We have a formal document process to track all of these reports, and we're able to go back and how was that handled? What did we do? When did we do it? Also, we have a semester review with the Perrysburg Police Division and the school resource officers with school staff to review these, which took place last month. So this isn't just the school looking at things, it is opening up this information to other eyes that look at things differently than schools. And then we have policy and governance. The board acted quickly, created a student safety and staff conduct anti-grooming ad hoc committee. It also created an anti-grooming policy something that other districts simply don't have. That's homegrown, that was built based on the feedback. And we also had scheduled multiple public presentations about this particular topic. So it's always out front. It is something that we're bringing to the table to talk about our progress and what we're doing. When you look at student voice and engagement, that's an important component of what we're doing. And the fact that we have a Students' Bill of Rights to be heard, where we want to empower students reporting. It's not just changing a policy that no one is going to look at. And people do look at policies, but by and large, how do we get to the students to make sure that they have an understanding, that they're able to understand what their rights are? And we engage with the advisory, the advocacy team, advisory team that I meet with monthly to get their feedback on this particular topic. That led to them saying, if you just hang up posters or just do an email, we're not going to understand what this means. And that led us to come up with a video recording that went out to families and students alike, along with the QR codes. And they said, have a QR code because that's what we want. Staff training and awareness, this is ongoing, but February, we designed our own training program for administrators, began to talk about a module in terms of how do you handle these specific kinds of situations. We shared that with the public and the board at a board meeting and gave some examples of how would you handle a situation if a custodian opened up a classroom door at 6 p.m. to clean that classroom door and found a teacher with 2 students. Is that something that you report? How do you react to that? So that was something that was important. But Title IX procedures, mandatory reporting, you heard a little bit about that this evening. And recognizing and addressing those kinds of behaviors, which is that training and those examples that I gave the board and in the public, like these are things that you need to ask those kinds of questions. I shared this information because our staff and how they feel about this, how they understand why we do what we do is very important to me. I know it's important to the board. And this gets staff nervous. Are people going to be looking at everything that we do? And sitting down with representatives like I do with the advisory committee almost every month and went over the training and the kind of questions that are resulting from the feedback that we're getting from the community and from these experiences. And they certainly understood and offered feedback about that. So that was something that was very important to us too, as we look at introducing some of this training next school year. And of course, the law enforcement and safety protocols. So when we have reports coming in, now we have the tip line, and how do we document that? When police reports are made and they can't turn over the police report, how are we documenting those kinds of things? When we talk about complaints that are coming in that aren't in the tip line, how are we documenting and talking about those kinds of things? We've had presentations to the board about those systems and process. Remember the board meeting where we had Assistant Superintendent Price and Director Foltz come and talk about this new process that they've instituted, so that there are multiple eyes on these kinds of complaints that are coming in. So it's something that we take seriously. So it involves the students, it listens to the students, and it took it a step further and said, this is how we want to communicate with the students, and that's going to continue. And again, we've had our informal, formal police reports reviewed. We had our semester meeting with the officers. That was very helpful to have them look through everything to provide that kind of feedback. And again, we've ended each of these reports with how to report for students as a reminder. So if someone tunes in or sees something, we always want to have this slide to make sure people understand where students can go to share, to help. So, so this is kind of that look in the review mirror as we hit June, in terms of, well, what have you done? Because have you done anything? Have you taken this seriously? And when we talked about this in January, we said it's not our words that matter to people, but it's our actions. And we know that it is something that we have to do these things. It's something that we chose to do these things, and it's something that we want to do these things because we want to take these steps to change that culture. And how do you do it? You do it by listening. You do it by making decisions and backing up the things that you're doing to make a difference. And I think we've been trying to do those things very deliberately. I applaud the board for, charting out this course, and certainly all the administrators, staff, and students who've had a hand in embracing this process and saying, this is the direction that we want to go in. So we're not where we want to be. We have work to do, and the work will never end, because this is an important topic, and we need to continue to refine. And that's part of why we have all this data and looking at it in the review mirror, because we want to look back and say, okay, where we've done these things, what are we missing? Where are our blind spots? What can we do better for next year? And this begins the planning for next year. So that's that information. So I don't know if there's any questions.
I think you just answered the question I was going to ask, because we're in, classes are not in session right now, and the number of reports, 0 for the month of June. My question would be like, what is the work that is done this summer? But I think you just said it right there. It's taking a look at the process and seeing where the improvements can occur as we start. August will be here before we know it. So yeah, thank you again, as always, everybody, for sharing this with the community.
I think the other challenge, just to, one of the things that we really are struggling in, Mr. Hostler referenced this a little bit, we certainly continue to put student safety as our primary directive in decision-making. And the challenge right now of these public records requests for the information that have come in and that potential chilling effect, that I feel like there's a double bind. I recognize the need for transparency, but there's this double bind now of wanting, if there really is a issue with a misconduct, behavioral issues with a staff member, we want to have enough information to be able to go and rightly again, anonymous reports are hard to utilize because they're anonymous. I mean, that's never facing your accuser. Well, when was this? What was, who was this person? At the same time, we want to protect the identity of those students. We don't want that to become public record. We don't want there to be enough information that even if a name isn't initially shared, that that makes it out onto Facebook before we've even been able to, really resolve the issue. So I feel like there's this sense of saying, well, maybe we should just tell everyone to be anonymous and go through the safer helpline. That would protect the student, but it's less actionable when it's anonymous. Some of the anonymous reports that we've received through the @reports email have been those kind of buckshot ones that just list a bunch of teachers. They're anonymous. And in most cases, we don't know why they were listed, but now that's part of public record, that they were named in this @reports for no cause. So this is the struggle that I'm feeling as a community member, as the member of this board, and working with the staff on this, is how to balance kind of actionable information with student safety, with student confidentiality and protection, in the midst of kind of this flurry of records requests about this information. So far, the district, I understand, has received year-to-date over 80 public records requests. I'm guessing we're even more since I last heard that count. Last year, I think all of last year, we had 50, 60? Okay, 65. Halfway through the year, we're already at 80, and a lot of it is related to this information, and that's problematic. We certainly have had some issues this year that would bring about some public records requests, but this is the balance that I feel like the system is a really important one, and at the same time, there's a lot of concerns about it. So I just want to raise that. I will say the policy, I've been, other board members have reached out to me and asked for our policy about student safety. So when Mr. Hostler said that this didn't exist in other districts, it didn't, and other districts are looking to add something like this. And I also think the communication and expectations that we have, that the administration have, that the community has about communication with the police have also begun to be clarified. That when they're in investigation, there is no public records request. We're not going to receive that information if there's been a report to the police. So I think things like that have been really helpful as we all get the same expectations.
So I think I'm confused. Are you saying that someone who reports either on the email or on the phone line, that they are subject to a public record request?
Correct.
I find that incredulous. That is wrong on every level to me. That it explains why people are doing it anonymously. I mean, they don't want. They've seen what happens to us and other people that dare to come forward or anything, and the excoriation that they get on social media, and how things are always said incorrectly, reported incorrectly, the misinformation piles and rolls. Why would they want to be involved in that? And it seems like it's taking this wonderful process that y'all have created and cutting it out at the knees. Too bad Julia's still not here. It would be interesting to hear the logic for an anonymous, safe reporting process. Where is the logic or the law that would allow that to be public knowledge when we're putting it here for someone to discreetly report something?
Yeah,
You might as well stand out in at the gazebo out here and just shout it out. It's the same thing. I don't understand that. Am I missing something?
There are different rules for different organizations in public sector. Schools are the most transparent. We are not law enforcement, and there are anonymous tip lines that can be made that way, but ours right now does not appear to have legal basis to keep it confidential. Just like public records requests. If you were to do a public records request, you could do it anonymously, but public records requests are also public records, right? So just the point is, go back to what the purpose of public records are, anything that documents the business of the district. There's certain, as Mr. Hostler says, certain exceptions. FERPA for student information, HIPAA for medical information, and there's some attorney-client privilege stuff in there. And then it's pretty wide open.
So I think, if you were someone and said, I saw an activity at a elementary field day and it didn't make me feel very comfortable, field days and they're crazy, and so I'm going to send an email to principal saying, I'm really concerned about this particular activity in student safety. What we've done now is we created a one collection point for those kinds of concerns that have to deal with staff. But if that didn't exist, that email from that parent to that principal is still a public record. So the fact that we are saying send it to this particular email, if that didn't exist, that email to that principal is still a public record.
But you're saying that the email to the report at is public record?
Correct.
Recordable.
Yeah. Because if it didn't exist and somebody said, I have something to share, and they share it with the school board or they share it with an administrator, that email is a public record unless it hits the criteria that Mr. Dreyer talked about.
But in that case, if that parent had called the principal to speak about it, that wouldn't have been documented.
Correct.
Unless there was then a reason for the principal to document it.
Correct.
Yeah, and then you've got that problem.
So Ohio law with the Ohio Safe Schools tip line has created a special category that says anything received by that tip line and then shared with the local school district, that is exempt from public record requests.
So that last one, the one that we've always had, that would be a more confidential
Correct.
way to go.
Correct.
Should that not be mentioned on there then?
It is.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
For an anonymous tip, okay.
Yeah.
But we may want to add the language that says this, any submission to @reports or any phone messages to this are subject to public records requests. Could be subject.
Yeah. I know we've talked about that, and I'd have to go back to the website to see what it says, if there's anything there, but we do say the Safe School tip line is anonymous. We don't say the others are.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's, we could be more clear about that, but.
Yeah, I would think so. What would happen if not exactly this, but the report and the 2800, if those were, sorry, police department, if those were reported to the police department instead of through us, would that give those people protection?
I don't.
I'm asking you a
Yeah,
legal
I don't
question,
have,
that's not
I don't
fair.
have, there's, at some point, because there are two different systems at play here. Because if you request a police report that involves students' name, it mentions students, they don't redact that because their laws say they can't. And witnesses they do, but if it's criminal activity, police reports have individuals' names included in it. There are certain things that the police department during an investigation can't share out. We have to share things in real time as we're doing investigations.
Yeah.
So there's different nuances, and then what police can share with the school district, once it becomes a police matter, there's limitations as to what they can share. And the police are probably not going to do anything with a report about a field day game that makes somebody uncomfortable. They're gonna say you need to call the school. So there are certain situations where that isn't a criminal activity.
I just wondered if going through that leg would give the people using those two new systems an option, but if they want to stay anonymous, then the school tip line is the way to go.
The police, the police have limitations too with public. I mean, they ultimately become public records, and what can be shared and can't be shared, it's a different set of rules that govern them than us. So.
We always get the different rules.
I think I'm gonna ask you to talk about a negative here, something you may not know, but the Ohio, the Safer Ohio School tip line. What are the rules for that? Does everything that gets reported to them filter its way to the proper district?
It
That
does.
you know of?
Yes,
Okay.
and it is not subject to public records requests. They
Just
carved
curious.
out,
We're trying to recall why we didn't just stick with that.
Yeah.
Or should we evaluate, is that the proper avenue as you take a look at what lessons learned?
I think there's some discussion as we kind of get into this, that might be where we substitute and say, this is what we're promoting, and it takes the place of the report at. Again, the reason we went into this is not just to report things that are happening, in real time, but we had a number of people that said we had made reports in the past and nothing was done with that. So in those cases, the Ohio Safe School tip line, from my understanding of how it operates, would not take those calls. We did, because we wanted to know if there was something 10 years ago, 20 years ago that happened. We wanted to know so we could dig into it. And they my understanding is they wouldn't.
And I'm really not advocating for that. I like the control that we have here locally, and I like the transparency, and I'm not advocating for finding a workaround for the transparency. Just acknowledging what President Roland Miller has said is that these records requests, 80 of them are a real issue.
Right.
But
The chilling effect.
There's been 80 that have come in for the district, but there has been one for this information, one. And that's what's causing us to pause. I think people have more or less left this alone, because we are reporting, we are doing these things, but there's been one request that has come in where they want this information, and that's what prompted us to go to the attorneys to say, what about this?
Well, I think if it's just a little bit more clear on there that the first 1, 2, 3 are not necessarily going to remain confidential and not subject to public record requests, but the last one, the Safer Ohio Schools, is. I think that's an important clarification, and let that person reporting decide what they want to do. Maybe you even need to include in that statement what things qualify for being held confidential and not subject to public records requests, so that they have the information that they need. If they know that they fall under one of those exempted areas, then maybe they would feel safe in using the local system.
It's a tough one, because our attorneys have been dealing with this for a number of weeks, trying to figure it out.
It's complicated because
They
some
just
of these that have been referred to the police, so it does transcend there, and now you're bumping into that. So it's made it a little bit more of a complicated question, other than just send it over and we'll redact it, and we have to cite the reason why we're redacting it. There's some other implications, because if the police are investigating the material that we provided them, there are some limited exemptions that could apply. So it's those kinds of things that we're trying to wade through.
Okay,
So,
golly, what a mess.
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to open up a hornet's nest on that one. Anything else, Mr. Hostler?
That's it. Thank you.
I'd like to move into number 8, Treasurer's Report. Mr. Drewer.
Okay. Well, you'll be happy. I think I got actually 3 content slides, so we'll move fairly quickly here. And Ms. Minke and Mr. Bennington, if you want to add anything from finance, I'm going to stay really focused just on our general fund finances for tonight. We've got other fish to fry. Plus, frankly, we're one pay period away from closing the fiscal year. I'm more focused on June 30th. But so we got the finances through May. A couple things on the board agenda, asking you to approve final permanent appropriations and then temporary appropriations. So on July 1, we can open the fiscal year. So let me just hit quickly, start with our normal cash balance slide. We're looking, we're tracking like we always do. And as we've already talked about, we're going to end the fiscal year slightly better than expected, slightly better than last year. And, you know, probably the main reason is some cost containment. The employees that we've not filled and other things we've done during the year. Looking at, to me, this is the more telling slide, though. Just a reminder that the light green is our cash balance, the dark red is our revenue, and the dark greens are expenditures. So our expenditures are relatively flat month to month. And the red is our revenue, so you can see why we need to carry cash balance. That's simply the story there. We get significant chunks in twice a year. We will get just a little bit of a bump here in June, not very much, but I'll talk about that here in a second. So last thing is, so here's where we are through May. Revenue is down year over year 3.6%, driven primarily by the failure, the rejection of the levy in November. Expenses are up 7.6%. We're 146 true cash days, which is I'm happy with. I wish we could stay there, but that's not going to be the case. A couple of comments here. I didn't highlight it, but if you look at the next to last line on the revenue, refund of previous year expense, you'll see that at 53.8%. That is waiting for our threshold cost reimbursement that we'll get this week. So just a reminder, I reported last month that threshold costs, which are reimbursement for special education students over a certain threshold, that money goes, that we all submit those costs, the state divides that money up, we get some portion back. That's for last year, right? So what I've decided to start doing is booking that as a refund of previous year's expense, because that does really reflect that they are not restricted revenue. So one of those things you'll see in the restricted state aid is down, but that's partially because of reclassifying that threshold cost into a refund of previous year expense rather than a current year revenue. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's kind of a mouthful. We're tracking right. Like I said, we've got just June to finish up. We're in good shape. I'm, certainly we're pleased to end the year better than expected, but I also want to recall that did not come without some pain, right? Certainly, the staff positions we filled, we had to restrict building access for outside groups, things like putting quotas on copiers and stuff like that. All of that adds into those numbers. So we're happy with it, but just remember it wasn't just like falling off a log. Any questions on that? So really, did it switch? Oh, so on trend. We should end the year on trend and get ready for the next fiscal year. So, any questions, comments? Mr. Bennington, Ms. Menke, anything to add?
No, there is nothing boring about this district's finances this year, other than probably the May or the April budget to actual results.
Yeah.
Like you said, just boring is beautiful when we're talking about this stuff. So, not that we didn't have a lot of other conversations about other stuff we'll get into. But.
All right, thank you very much.
So you'll see there in 8.2 is a financial report. We have final appropriations in 8.3. Temporary appropriations to get us into the new year. And in 8.5 to authorize that between now and the end of the fiscal year, any expenditures that are needed. And so in 8.6, we have a motion to approve the agenda items 8.2 to 8.5.
So moved.
Mr. Bennington, Ms. Menke, any discussion, questions about those?
One comment about 8.5. I put it in there every year. Now, fortunately, we don't have to do it that. The reason we do that, if we didn't do that, we'd probably need to have our regular board meeting or special meeting like at the 28th or 29th of every month. That's why we do that. Now, there is always some question whether or not that is actually enforceable, but it's kind of a CYA for me at this point.
So if anyone wants to vote against 8.5, they can
Please
find
do.
another board member to call a special meeting, because I'm not calling one.
That was a threat, wasn't it?
Tempted just to see how that would go.
Any other questions, discussion? Mr. Giroux, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington?
Yes.
Ms. Minke?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Larimer?
Yes.
Ms. Roland Miller?
Yes. 8.7, we have several documents related to the Finance Committee meeting that was on Friday. Ms. Menke or Mr. Bennington, additional?
Well, I'm wondering if we need to go into 9.1. I mean, what's the best way to have this conversation? We are certainly, we came to this board meeting with the intent of making a recommendation as part of a discussion for the November ballot initiative. But I think it may be best to let Mr. Hostler and Mr. Dreyer update us on what's going on in Columbus. That probably better sets the stage for that conversation.
That's not happening? Okay. Anything specific about the meeting, or we will move into 9?
Well, I think the meeting is our next conversation, so.
Okay. So we're going to move into 9. We're at 7:45 already. Does anyone need a break?
Yeah, I would.
Okay. 3, 4 minutes, 5 minutes?
5 more minutes.
Say 3 and we'll be back in 5.
Let's try 3. Take a break until 8:40 or 7:46, not 8:46 yet. think what I'd like to do is call us back to order and skip over number 9 until Mr. Hostler is back in the room. And so we can move into committee reports. Would that work? Is everyone okay with that shift? So number 10 is community engagement. There are minutes there from our meeting on the 10th for your perusal. We also have been meeting, we have had 3 meetings so far with the Communications Task Force. It's a fabulous group of people, fairly representative of the community. We didn't really know who we were picking when we picked them based on their written applications, and we've gotten a really great cross-section of the community. We are at the point where we're really focusing in on kind of key vehicles, key audiences. There seems to be a significant need to be on social media and Facebook. That's been very loud. There seems to still be a desire for direct mail and email. It just depends on what generation I think you're a part of. But right now we're really focusing on kind of what does it look like to talk more about the impact on students and the importance of first-person narratives in that. Everybody on the committee did some homework and did some very informal surveying of different people, and so we're still working our way through that. I don't know, Ms. Mackey, if anything, you want to add anything else?
Pretty much covered it all.
Okay. We decided to just skip around. Let's go back up to 9. So Mr. Drew and Mr. Hostler, I will say some of us were on the 12 o'clock call about House Bill 335, and I decided to do something less frustrating than listening to that presentation and the information that was provided about what might happen. So I decided to give my dog a bath and groom my dog. And if anyone has that, that was actually less frustrating than listening to that call. I was thinking of going out and working on my golf game afterwards and didn't have time. So we will be talking about some of the scenarios and the impact of multiple bills, but I think especially House Bill 335, the latecomer to the game. So Mr. Hostler and Mr. Drewer.
We'll certainly move quickly here because I think the most important thing is the board get an opportunity to talk and discuss and reflect. We just want to share some basic information, and so Randy and I will both kind of, get into some of this information and how we want to share it. So what we understand based on the activities and the rhetoric that we're hearing about, and certainly choosing to groom your dog is a more relaxing task than listening to the rhetoric and actions that are happening, I think says a lot. Because it's going to have whatever's going to come out of the conference committee is going to have an impact on schools, and we just don't know yet exactly how. Past biennium budgets, you kind of know it could be a swing of a few $100,000, and in a $70 million a year budget, a few $100,000 is a lot of money to me and you. But in the grand scheme of things, you can make that work. But what we're talking about here is a swing of millions of dollars for our district, depending on which way things are going to go. So that uncertainty with unprecedented property tax reforms that are being weighed in Columbus, and the impact that will have on public schools, Perrysburg, and other government entities. And then we also know there's a drive for a constitutional amendment to eliminate all property taxes. So that's something that is also happening and separate from the biennium budget, but we're watching. So this is kind of this situation is evolving, and we're waiting for the outcome, and the state legislature with their actions. So it's this split screen that we talk about. This split screen that we know is, what Randy's talked about in May with his 5-year forecast, looking in his crystal ball, not great, but I think it kind of represents what you see on the left side of the screen where kids are at recess and playing. What's happening in the conversations and the implications of what those could mean to schools in Perrysburg. There's a storm coming, And, you know, that's kind of the split screen that we're talking about right now. So all the conversations and everything we had up to just a few weeks ago was more reminiscent of what's on the left side of the screen. That you know, based on what the Senate came out with, Randy's 5-year forecast that I think will be okay. Here's where we need. We presented options to the board. Here are 5 different levy options. Let's dig into it. But now there's these storm clouds that are coming, and it's changing the whole picture significantly. So, so that kind of is what happened in May and June. It seemed like there was a little bit of a consensus in the last conversation, if I can kind of stake out that claim a little bit or put a stake in that claim, that there was more interest in that particular levy. And we wanted to make sure that as we talk about this 7.8 mil levy that was discussed coming out of May, it did not restore any of the $6 million where those cuts were based on. So Randy presented the 5-year forecast option with that 7.84 mil levy, ends up with 44 true cash days. The board discussed 60 is where we want to be. You say that through your board policy. And if you're not at 60, we have to come up with a plan to share with the board how we're going to get to 60. So 44 is below that bar, but within striking distance. That 7.8 mil levy is actually, you know, less than the 9.7 mil levy that expired on December 31st of 2024. So people would be paying less than what they were in the last year of the levy that expired when the voters rejected it. So that's a difference per $100,000 of $66.50 annually, or $5.54. Also, you know, wait, there's more. We are retiring the debt for the bond issue on the high school. So that's 1.7 mils that is falling off forever. So when you couple that to whatever ask the board is going to generate, there's 1.7 that will be lighter than what the voters will be considering because of those that millage coming off. And we heard from the board, we need to make sure that we're talking about that too. So that's kind of, you know, how this works. And the net feel is you know, $17.79 a month per 100,000 for that 7.8 mil levy when considering the 1.7 mils that fall off.
Tom, can we go back to the true cash days slide,
Yep.
slide 6, just real quick. I want to remind the board, there's 3 key assumptions in here. I used the Senate, and you'll see here in a minute where it ties in. I used the Senate's financials, their formula, if you will, their funding. I used Senate Bill 66, which at the time we thought was kind of not the worst case property tax reformation, and those 2 things, and the 11, and this here is 7.8 mils. So remember, keep those three things in mind, and remind again, $6 million in cuts are still built in here. So there's no restoration of programs that we haven't already restored. So I just want to make sure, I want to kind of beat that home because it comes back around here in a minute.
Right.
Do you want to expound on what all that Senate Bill 66 included?
We'll get to it.
Yep.
Yep.
Wait, there's more.
Yeah.
So now we're going to move in. So that's the part here. And originally, this probably where the slide deck would end, and the board would begin to consider, well, okay, is it a 3-year levy? Is it a 5-year levy? You know, does 7.8? How does everyone feel? And the idea was at this meeting, this is where the presentation would end. And the board would reach a consensus in that neighborhood, and we'd be directed to go to our attorneys and begin the process to get it on the ballot.
In case you were wondering,
Yep.
probably from the finance committee what that recommendation, probably still a bit more discussion on probably a little more discussion on the duration of it, but we had locked in this $11 million, although not ideal, doesn't bring any of the programs gifted, all the work that we've done, the positions that have been eliminated. Again, none of that comes back. Athletic fees, the arts fee, or I'm sorry, the performing arts fees are all still in place. I mean, all of those things are still necessary with $11 million, at the $11 million levy. would have been worth it, would have been a true statement at the, the money that expired, the $13.5 million. But with all the cuts that were made, with the redistricting of the elementary schools, that so far seems successful, but we're not to August yet to see who's going to show up at the wrong school in August potentially. We were able to stay in a position, look, $11 million isn't ideal. Not for the district, doesn't bring things back, but it's something that we think can get the district can go ahead with over the next 4 or 5 years at a level understanding that I think, as we talked about in finance, every dollar is going to matter over that next 4 or 5 years at the $11 million. It's still not an open checkbook. There would be a lot of fiscal accountability that would need to continue to occur at that level. So that was, just in case you were wondering what we were going to say, that's what we were going to say until we showed up to finance Friday morning.
And there's a little typo here, Tom. It's House Bill 696.
Okay.
Senate Bill 66 is something else, but
Okay. All right.
just
What's that supposed to be?
it's House Bill 96 and omnibus bills. So this slide shows you, this is the state funding for us on the 3 proposals: the governor's proposal, House Bill 96 substitute, and Senate omnibus 96. And you can see the Senate bill, and this is because of the growth factor and the 5-star, the performance factor, we get more funding. So that way, kind of felt kind of comfortable that if you take the best case funding, add in a little bit property tax reform, that made the 5-year forecast feel realistic at this point. And obviously, with the conference committee, we could end up any one of these places or in between places. We don't know at this point.
Yeah. So the governor's proposal, the House, and then the Senate, it did. There are differences there, and we'll dig into some of those so that you're aware of those. They all make sure that the fair school funding formula is intact. However, they're not updating the state's share, which really breaks down the formula, because as local districts become wealthier, they're expected, the values of those communities go up. Local districts are expected to pay more. In the state, what they're coming to the table are old numbers from years ago, averages, so they're paying less. So you can begin to see the percent of what, the state share when they are fully funding the formula and updating those inputs, because that was a big thing that we wanted to do. We saw where we were maintaining at a certain level of the state share, a percent. Now that that's away, we're relying more and more on local taxpayers. So that's where that shifting of the funding from state to local residents, that's where we're talking about that. And it's interesting because back of the napkin, the Senate put down $350 million for guarantees. They put down $250 million in the performance that Randy mentioned, that we were a big beneficiary of that as a 5-star district, and then $70 million for the enrollment, for growing enrollment. If you were to take those dollars, you could update the state's inputs, which would benefit all the districts. So we're close. There is money there if they choose to want to spend it on that, and that's not what they chose to do. So the funding is one piece, but last week, in the last 2 weeks, everything has changed. So you have the biennium budget in the Senate and the House, all kind of wrangling, and you saw the numbers that Randy put together for Perrysburg. But now they're talking about these sweeping laws that are tax reform bills, and they've been bundled into one bill, and it is likely that is going to make its way into conference committee, and that will have a dramatic impact on school funding. So you have, again, these two fronts, going back to the storm analogy, coming together, And so we wanted to spend a little bit of time about, okay, you saw where the Senate is, Randy's projections, we can make it 11, the 7.8 mil levy, we can get through this. But now, depending on what they do with tax reform, that changes the equation significantly.
Yes, specifically Senate Bill 66, that's why I incorporated in the forecast, really takes into account House Bill 129, 186, and 309. What it doesn't take into account, and we don't have it up here, Tom, I don't know how we missed it, is the biggest change is the elimination of inside millage.
Yeah.
That's the biggest change in this. Okay, that's dramatically changes a lot of things. And it's not just, schools are 60% of that, right? It will show you the numbers, but we lose, let's say, $6 million a year. Wood County loses 11 million, right? The only group that is unaffected by the inside millage is the townships because they have no other mechanism to raise taxes, to raise money. The county can do a sales tax, schools can do an income tax. So the feeling was we'll protect the townships, but counties and school districts, you have to go figure out some other way to get the funding.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of these funding things because this House Bill 33, it's all of these things. It's property tax relief, and it goes much further than that. I think that one of the things that it begins to do is gets into this. Here's some general questions about this. So one of them is, who introduced it? It's a former county auditor who's a freshman representative. It also talks about $1.5 billion in annual school district revenue going out the window with this reform across Ohio.
I think they revised that up to about $2 billion.
Yeah. How much money would district lose on inside mills? And we're going to talk a little bit about inside mills because people who are just kind of tuning in, like, I've never heard of this. And so there's some questions and answers. We're not going to go through these, but we want to focus on this inside millage. So in Ohio, there are 88 counties. And right now, every county has 10 mills that the county commissioners can levy to help support local government entities in that county. So I'm going to use a very simple kind of explanation. And they break it up as to how many mills go towards schools, how many goes towards this other government entity, whatever it may be. So in Wood County, 4.8 mills of the 10 go towards public schools. In Lucas County, it's 5 mills. So that gives you a little bit of a variance of where these land. So those 10 mills, that 4.8 is applied to the district's valuation every year. So when the district continues to grow, that 4.8 doesn't roll back because of House Bill 920. That inside mills will collect a little bit of growth off of whatever happens inside your school district at that time. So that 4.8 mills, and so Perrysburg has 4.3 general fund mills, and then a half a mil that goes permanent improvement for technology. So that's how the 4.8 are divided once it hits our books.
And if we could take, if I could interrupt real quick, the 10 mills that you referred to, how is that enabled? Is that through the budget? Is that through the Ohio Revised Code? That's the Constitution.
It's in the Constitution.
So in the Constitution, the Ohio Constitution gave counties the right to assess 10 mills not voted.
Right.
So obviously there's a potential constitutional fight on that.
Okay.
But again, we have a legislators, General Assembly, easier for me to say, that doesn't seem to, we've seen some ballot measures, constitutional, where they just continue to ignore it. So we don't know how effective that would be.
So the amount of money that we're talking about for Perrysburg, so if where we eliminate those inside mills, where schools and other entities can't collect, that first year we would see a decrease of $3.1 million. That's 2026. 2027, you would see the full impact, which would be 6.4. And again, as Perrysburg grows, we've seen a little bit of growth on those 4.8 mills. The other levies that we have are subject to House Bill 920. This isn't. So you see a little bit of growth, that we were able to collect. So that represents what Randy has built into his 5-year forecast, is that little bit of growth. So we would be losing $6 million. And there's no mechanism to recoup that other than to go to the voters to ask for more.
And here's the challenge. Think about this. If, like I said, we have legislators who say, hey, school districts, you don't have to use property tax. You can use income tax. You're absolutely right. But think about this. In our general property tax, 80% of that is residential. Tangible personal property tax, it's 100% of that comes from public utilities. And state share is just that local tax discount that we get back. So think about what would happen on the burden shift. If we have to make up $6.4 million in income tax, I'm not suggesting we should, only residents pay that, not businesses, not public utilities. So at the same time you're trying to give property tax reliefs to homeowners, you're potentially, if you want to replace a property tax dollar for dollar, it costs more. Right. Okay? And so
To
I'm
a
not,
resident, to a homeowner.
right, to a homeowner,
To a homeowner.
right? And we're 80-20 district now, so the burden is already on residential already. You're just going to pile it on. And I just want to contrast, let's say, a Rossford, it's even worse. They're 50-50. So if you can imagine if they were expected to make up an income tax. So the thing is, the whole thing is just poorly conceived, to be put it fairly at this point. And so, this is the storm, right? This is what we don't know. And the fact it happens on January 1st.
Yeah, not much
So
time to adjust.
if we are not prepared in November, where our plan is to deal with it, we have to wait a whole year, right? Because, so anyway,
And then imagine another component of both the House and the Senate is capping the amount school districts can put into their cash balance. So we're talking about true days cash. So while they're talking about getting rid of the inside millage here, there's also provisions that it could be 30%, it could be 50%, who knows what's going to come out. But both chambers said, we want to cap what school districts have. So they're also taking away those cash, the dollars that you could have to help weather a storm like this. At the same time, they're also taking money away here through this mechanism. So
Doesn't something like this hurt a tax structure like Rossford more? Because they don't have their strong financial base or their businesses, which wouldn't get taxed, so they're probably happy. But then the people are going to have to pay almost twice as much as what they're paying already.
if we replace it with an income tax. Typically, inside millage, in general, now, as Mr. Hosser pointed out, inside millage ranges from 4 to 5 for school districts across every county in the state. The fact is, we're a high-value district, right? So inside millage is more significant to us. The other thing is to recognize we're not, depending the 20 mil floor becomes an issue here. We don't know how that's going to work out. You've got all these districts who are at the 20 mil floor. We are until you add in our fixed sum levy, right? So we're no longer on the 20 mil floor. So there's no way to compensate for that within our current structure except going back to mom and pop homeowner and say, we need to make this up or we need to make these kinds of reductions. And so, I mean, it's really kind of, it's a scary scenario because we don't have, we have to make a decision for November here in the next couple of weeks, but we should know at that point. Now the question is, well, if we have to make up for this in November, and please don't, there's another part of this we haven't talked about is that's that $500,000 PI levy that generates $700,000 a year. That's not included in this number. So if you think about it, if we have to add into our capital and supply spending to cover the PI stuff, that's another $500,000 to $700,000 you need to add in here.
That's not included in this.
It's not included in this.
Just general.
It's not general fund money.
Because that confused me on the call today.
What's that?
So you're not on.
Oh, sorry. Well, there could be value to that. It almost sounded to me like they were also considering taking our PI levy away.
They are. It's any inside millage. It doesn't matter what it's for. And
PI levy is inside millage?
It's the
Or
technology,
technology
it's the half a mil
piece.
technology, not the PI that just was passed by
Oh, okay,
voters. Yep,
okay.
Yeah, we got
See,
two
that's
PI.
where I was
Yeah.
getting confused.
Well,
All
and
right.
then, and just throw on, now, we're not in a situation, but I know districts who have taken inside millage and said, hey, we're gonna move a half mil to pay for this project, this capital project. They're funding a school building off of that. Or if they've got an OFCC project, they've got a half mil they have to put up there for maintenance that's coming, that goes away. There's no, it's not what you're using it for, it's inside millage. No matter what you put it in there, the board has decided to use it for, it's gone.
So here's kind of.
Questions now make
Yeah.
sense that were being asked in the
Yeah.
chat. Okay.
So if you're keeping score, all the different things that are affecting what we're doing, because I know we're kind of scattered with this, and but I think one is, you hear about the 20 mil floor, and that is something that they want to do, want to address. And how the 20 mil floor works is because of House Bill 920, a circuit breaker back in the 70s. If we have over 40 mills, Randy, help me out here, over 40 mills that are voted, that are subject to House Bill 920, and now because the community has grown, we can only collect that specific dollar amount. We have fallen below 20 mills needed to collect the dollars that have been approved by the voters. So the law says now that districts that fall below 20 mills, you can raise taxes to get back up to 20 mills because this other circuit breaker keeps taking the millage down, 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 and the money doesn't grow. They're saying we're gonna move the 20 mil floor so that that increase that we received when we fell below the 20 mil floor won't be on the table anymore. So that's one thing that's part of this bundle of things that we're watching. Over 400 school districts are at or below the 20 mil floor. So this isn't a Perrysburg thing. This is something that is happening across the state. Anthony Wayne, as you recall, they fell below the 20 mil floor. They had a levy on. If voters would have passed the levy, they would have paid less. Since they rejected the levy, they fell further below the 20 mil floor, and the automatic raising up to get to the 20 mil floor cost them more. So the 20 mil floor is something that districts and people are hearing this automatic increase to get to 20 mils, and they're saying we're going to stop that. So that's one thing. And then you have the inside mills, which is $6 million for us. It's 1.9, I looked it up just now, 1.9 billion across Ohio that goes to public schools that would be gone.
It's 6.4 million plus 700,000. I mean,
yes.
we start out in 2027 losing over $7 million, and then we're close to $8 million in 28 and 29.
The other thing, it gives the county tax commission the authority to determine whether or not, if voters say we want to fund Perrysburg at this level, the tax commission, my understanding is, will have the right to say, not so fast. We feel you need this. And so that's a lever that we're also looking at. And then the elimination of replacement levies. And limiting what districts can do there with replacement levies.
And why that's important, for example, if this inside millage went away, and we said, look, Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer, inside millage went away, we need to add 4.8 mils to our ask. Well, guess what? Because it's a new levy, it has homestead exemption, but it doesn't have rollback and non-commercial. So it actually, dollar for dollar, because it's going to cost homeowners for the same amount for the district.
More for the same millage.
Yeah. So it's not just one thing. It's not just, it's this. It is a whole bunch of things, and all of those will have an impact on what we can do or what we might do. So here's some things in terms of kind of capturing it. How do you talk about to your legislators, which is really important right now because they're in conference committee, and things can get brought into conference committee and end up in the bill that gets voted out that there has been no hearings on or so it's very important that people find their voice. But we're talking about the inside mills is a challenge across all Ohio and certainly here in Perrysburg. There's no replacement funding mechanism for it, so it's a cut, and then go find your own way to recoup those dollars. while we're educating kids. Think about the number of teachers, because I think about this all the time. I know exactly with $6 million reduction that we had to come to terms with, how many teachers does that equate to? What's another $6 million of cuts mean to our staff? And what does $1.9 billion mean to teachers across Ohio?
What was the figure that he used today? Because it equated to 20,000 teachers.
Yeah, I
Was
didn't catch that number, but yeah. So we have a tradition in Ohio of local control. People elect you, and you run the district, and you make decisions, and if people are unhappy, they replace you. And this takes away many of the levers that local school boards have. And that's alarming, and that's not what Ohio has been or should be. And so, this is something that is considering, is again, voters vote for a levy. There's another tax commission that determines whether or not you really need that. That's local control, taking away constitutionally, the inside millage. It takes away that local control. So these are important things. The reduction of the 50% or 30%, school districts make a decision. We want to have a cash reserve. Districts don't have permanent improvement levies. They raise money, they bank money, they make sacrifices to build up that cash reserve. Now to have Columbus come in and say, no, we know better. And that same district that has the money set aside is going to then, reduce taxes and then turn around and ask voters the next year to raise their taxes, to raise the money they just gave back to do that addition or to fix that roof. It's just not.
It makes every county, all 88 counties, very different. There'll be no unification at all. There'll be, when the Constitution requires that the common school, which back then was the only thing that they had was a common school, a public school, that it be fully funded. Well, this just goes like racing to the banshees the opposite direction.
Yeah,
This is nuts. I found that thing. He said 2 billion. You just mentioned 1.9.
Yeah, he rounded up.
Okay,
Yeah.
So that 2 billion was in reference to what?
The inside millage going away for Ohio schools. It's a bigger number than that, actually,
Yeah.
but that's just the public schools portion in Ohio.
And that's what he said
Yeah.
was equating to 20,000 teachers across the state. He said, we'll lose everything if we don't have our teachers.
Yeah, so local taxpayers will pay more and get less. And we know that in Perrysburg. Higher class, where do you find $6 million more?
It's $6 million a year more.
No, yeah.
Right? So it's not just a one-time, right? Inflation, so that it's.
Well, and I know we keep just looking at the general fund number, but I want to point out that PI the 0.5%, that's going to now have to come out of the general fund. So when I keep seeing that, whatever 6 point or 7 point, we need to add that because we still are going to need to provide computers and technology
and you have options, right?
No, that's Dewey.
We do it, well, but like the PI levy, you could do a $500,000 PI levy, right?
Yeah.
You could do a separate levy if you thought that would be an advantageous strategy to get it out of the general fund because it specifically goes to technology, if that made it an easier sell. Or you build it in.
We could say that about the $6 and $7 and $8 million as well. That's
well,
the
no,
challenge.
Levies are.
The key is so people don't anchor 6 in their minds because it's not 6.
It's
6 plus 700,000 is the number.
Yeah, it's 7 million when you round up. But yeah, so if you don't do something separate, you got to build that into whatever our plan is, right? And the fact is, we are a 1-to-1 district from 3rd grade on. And, we got 10,000 devices with an obsolescence cycle of 5 years. So do the math.
And I think, so the board, going back to May when the skies were a little bit less dark, we need to stabilize the patient, because if we don't do something to address the levy rejection, it is another round of reductions, the next year and then the following year. So we're already gearing up for this revenue decline because we use one-time money to get through this year out of our cash reserve. And then we used $6 million to balance that. We don't have the one-time cash
Anymore.
to do that for the next year. So this situation now is totally separate to the conversation that we were having in May. In May, it was like, okay, how do we stabilize the patient? And this is what we need as a district just to keep doing what we're doing and to protect what we have today. Everything that we've just talked about is pulling, it doesn't even address that. It's more. It's more money being sucked away. And you hear the vacuum cleaner in Columbus firing up. And that's over and above what brought us to this point to talk about a levy.
Like I said, not by a couple $100,000, I mean, by 80% more.
And we don't mean to be, alarmist about this. And I think we've been through budget, stuff all the time. But you heard it on the call, statewide call today. You're hearing it in other government entities that are impacted by this. This is a different situation than we've ever seen. And it's not just one thing. It's not just this one thing. It's all of these things lining up. And who knows what is going to make its way into the biennium budget. But stuff is going to make it there.
Dr. Fleeter said that this reached the proportion of cataclysmic catastrophe. And for him to say that, that put such a chill down my spine. I just don't even. I mean, I'm looking at these names here, the Gavarone, Gambari, Williams, McCauley. Why are they not listening to the professionals in this field, i.e. you two and your
Well, I think they need to hear from parents. I think they need to hear from citizens. I think they need to hear from you.
Well, that would be my next suggestion.
I think they need to hear from property. I think the most frustrating piece of this is that this has been presented as a way to save people from the increases on their property taxes due to the really historic and probably one-time revaluation that hit us. I will say I went back and looked at my taxes, and over that same period, my taxes went up at exactly the amount of inflation. With all of this, and I realize everybody's house value went up a little bit different, everybody throughout the state, but here in Perrysburg, for mine, my taxes went up, but they went up literally at the rate of inflation. So they're trying to save everybody from property taxes. That's probably a one-time thing. They even admit in some of their bills that it's probably a one-time thing. And in the meantime, they're pushing us into a corner where they're saying, and they've said, well, you can now generate funds from income taxes. So we are saving, as Mr. Juror pointed out, we're saving businesses money, but we're ultimately going to be asking even more money then from individual residents in our district. And I think the thing that struck me most today was the comment that there is an incredibly complex problem about house values, property values. School funding is very, very complicated, and I think in some ways they're trying to correct that so that we can all understand it better. But it's complex and it's significant, but they've done by shoving this in, and I'm going to use that word in particular, by shoving this in right before the deadline, there is no really thoughtful way to consider the consequences. And that's been my frustration as each of these bills has rolled out, is that I've kept saying, and I've texted this sometimes to some people, has anyone thought through the consequences of this? And in this case, I want to move us into discussion, and I don't even know what we can discuss at this point, because understanding the consequences of House Bill 335 is enormous. And to do this without the opportunity for public comment and hearings is really unethical to me. And I ended at that call today just so angry, and I decided to take a break with my dog and had fun. I hate giving my dog a bath.
I'd like to know Arwen's opinion of what
Yeah,
you
she
did,
wasn't
yes.
happy about that call either.
I
So
would like to make
but
it-
the question is really, what is it that we can actually discuss tonight? Because I do think we need to encourage one another and the public and anybody who owns property in Perrysburg who's an individual resident, this is not the solution that's gonna really help property tax
No,
reform.
not at all. One of the things that they repeatedly said on the call was to tell our story. So your Q&A here gives a lot of information. And I thought maybe it was on something else that you showed us. Oh, discussing with your legislators. Could we have, I know this needed to be done yesterday, but we didn't know about all of this yesterday. Can we take that information and just be very myopic and relate it to us? I know it's affecting our neighbors. I know it's affecting every 88 counties in here, and I don't mean to be selfish, but if we're going to ask beg our community to understand the disaster that this bill and budget is, can we translate all this information into very specific?
I think we have one slide that tells it all. If you go to the one with the estimate of how much we lose.
Plus the
Yes,
700.
but that's money, and there's so many people who say, well, fine, lose the money. We don't want to be paying this much in taxes. I think we need to translate that into programs, into the effect that it will have on their property. Yeah, we're going to lose that much money, but you're going to be spending more to make up for it. They're not.
At our last meeting, in the hypothetical of what it would take to make sure our expenses didn't increase by more than 4% a year, Mr. Hostler and Mr. Drewer presented a hypothetical, very hypothetical list of what would cut $6.5 million. So it's that list.
That's the order of magnitude. that
Plus
this-
another $700,000.
That's 75 to 100 staff members.
That's
what
what's
that
at
is.
risk.
There you go.
That's 75 to 100 staff members. And it's.
But each year?
It's each, well, that's the cut, and then you're gonna have to keep cutting to keep up with that.
We would have to cut more into
If
fiscal year
it
28.
was just certified staff, you're talking about 75 to 80 certified staff members. We don't have 25 classified staff to cut. I mean, we're down, I mean, you cut high school transportation, you start doing these other things, you can eliminate sports, all those things, you're gonna have to, that's what this means.
That's the conversation that becomes on the table, is how much of that 7.1 is split between cuts and what is feasible on the ballot.
Yeah, and I didn't even count the 700, so add another 8 teachers in there, so you're at 85.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can try to put that together, but that's the order of magnitude we're talking about.
And also in the bill, I mean, it's just one of those things you just like, it's not even the worst thing, and it's that school levies have to pass by 60%.
That's in there. And what did he say, 25% of levies
Less
in the
than
state?
20,
20%?
yeah, 20%,
20%
yeah.
of levies in the state of Ohio passed by more than 60% or more.
Which I've always thought, you put that in the voters' hands, any levy into the voters' hands, that changes that. It dies amongst 5 community members without the community ever getting a chance to say how they feel about a levy.
Does that thinking apply to just school levies?
Just school.
And see, that's what's wrong about it. Why are they always attacking the schools? I've been in on those conversations of making money grabs from government organizations needing to pass by some sort of super majority, not a simple majority, and that really, to me, in a lot of ways, makes sense. But why is it just schools? So the library can come along and pass more, and it can only be by 51%. The city, none of that makes sense to me.
I realize I'm a little wrapped up in this and not doing a very good job moderating, and I realize that Mr. Anderson and Ms. Menke have not been able to jump in because the rest of us are fired up about this a little bit. So I want to make sure that Mr. Anderson or Ms. Menke, and the discussion may need to be, if this is the scenario, are we looking at a portion of cuts versus adding more to the 11 million levy we were thinking was going to be just barely enough? So anyway, I want to make sure Ms. Menke and Mr. Anderson actually had a chance to get in if they wanted.
Well, in finance, we did go over our best case scenario and our worst case scenario. Not that the best case was really the best case.
I call them the worst and the worst.
But I mean, that's looking at 11 million for going on the ballot. And at that, your best case gives you 28 days of true cash, which once we roll around to the end of December, beginning of January into February, that's where we're going to cut it close with making payroll.
Just in the first year.
Just, yeah.
As you go into out years, there'll be borrowings occurring.
Exactly. And then worst case scenario, we are out of money in 2 years. And yes, not making payroll. So, basically what everyone has said, this is going to be a case looking at what they want to do now. It's going to put the burden 100% on the citizens, which I hope the public out there understands that. And yes, none of the districts are even somewhat prepared for it.
That we're probably at the worst, just more like a property manager with 5 or 6 buildings that nobody comes to, because we'll have to completely change the way kids get educated in this district.
Look out, private schools, here they come.
Already there with the voucher money.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the key for me is we're gonna have to work with what we have, right? There's so many unknowns out there right now, right? 11 might be a smidge under where you need to be when you look at that first year, but I think given the number of unknowns and the number of different scenarios that can come out, and then add on top of that the potential constitutional ballot initiative to eliminate property taxes, I think there's dominoes that are going to fall over the next 5 years that are going to require reevaluating the funding scenarios, right? And so the part of the conversation is, can you do a single levy in November that solves the equation for 5 years? Probably not. The number would be so large it wouldn't make it, but then it's also a property tax levy, so if the ballot initiative passes, then you're back to square one. So and it needs to be some sort of multi-pronged approach at how do you start to balance a property tax levy in November with then, based on how the funding situations and clarity starts to come from the various initiatives at the state, do you have to look at making a conversion to an earned income and then adjusting earned income sometime in the 26-27 timeframe? And how do you start to stitch that out? Because I don't think you can do it all in one shot in November and cover it for 5 years And that may be the message to the community is that's not on the table anymore as one levy in November that covers it for 5 years, unless they, I'll say, come to their senses and drop 35 from it, but it doesn't sound like that's going to happen. And so we're going to have to think about this from a multi-step approach on how do we ensure that we can maintain what we have today and give ourselves time to figure out, okay, well, what's the next step based on, you know, because you could end up with a constitutional challenge to it that gets upheld, at which point the inside millage comes back. And it could get tied up for several years. So lots of different scenarios that can play out that we just don't know what they are. But what we do know is if we don't pass a levy in November, we're going to start making cuts next year that are going to be much more significant than the ones that were just made.
That's one other thing.
Add to that, sorry, the ballot initiative for property tax, I would think for now, I would push that aside.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. If that passes, we're out of business, okay? We will operate for 2 or 3 months in January, February, then we're done. We're out of money because it's that part of our budget. So to me, that's kind of the death sentence. It's a different, we're not going to solve that one. But I think your point on the other things, I think you need to talk about. Sorry,
Okay.
I'll shut up now, maybe.
Trying to think about what I was going to say.
Sorry,
but it's-
I feel real.
Just blew it right out.
Well, and it, you know, to your point, if it does happen, there's going to be more or less a huge revolt with all the schools. And, you know, as somebody who has been through the whole funding schools, I have a big problem with what we did because we examined what amount of money we're giving schools, but we did not dig deep and look at the origin of where the money is coming from. And that is, to me, that is the very crux of what, Randy, help me with the name of school funding, yeah, no,
The court
lawsuit,
case in
the
90s.
court case. Yeah, the DeRolf, that's what it was about, is really where the money is coming from. And if that's the case, then to me, it'd be gloves are off. All these state mandates that you say, we're going to go back to the basics. We're going to educate kids. I don't care about what your reports you want at the state level. That's too bad. You've cut us off so much that we're not doing that. We're doing what we're supposed to do, and we're going to educate kids.
And that'd be about the only thing we could do. There wouldn't be any activities or anything like that, and just, it would be a drastic change. Wouldn't be a great experience for the kids.
I think one of the pieces that I've always hung up as a priority as we've talked through our levy scenarios and what our assumptions were was that need to, I really dislike this, but I'm going to have to use it, stabilize the patient. Mr. Hassel is laughing at me right now. That stability that is impacting not only our hiring practices or abilities, but morale. Just even our time and the administration's time of being able to plan longer term when we're constantly in this crisis. And the frustration for me is that we find ourselves in a new crisis for, you know, the 11 million would have, which really was the worst case scenario 2 weeks ago, would have provided us that stability to be able to step back, look at the future, look at what education can and should be in our district, give some sense of permanency to our staff, especially our newer staff. And to me, that's still a priority that I want to hold on to, that I realize that there's going to have to be a lot of course corrections in the next couple years if even small percentages of House Bill 335 go through. But I would like to see a levy that gets us through not having to ask for new money next year. Now, again, House Bill 335 may throw that desire and I think needed foundation in our district out the window. But if there is, my priority would be going forward, depending on what does come out of conference committee, that we look at a way to get through into maybe 27 before we're asking the good residents of this district for more funding. So I'm just going to put that out as one of my priorities. I don't know if it's realistic or not at this point, but until we see those scenarios, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that. I mean, I am also interested in whatever levy decision we do, pushing off the next one as far as possible. So I'll even go out 5 years, even more impossible, depending on what comes out of conference committee. But the thought of you put it out there, and I had stopped to think about it. You know, trying to avoid a levy every year is a scary proposition if that's what we're down to. But it could be. It could be. Yeah, is it 3 years out, 4 years out? That seems to be the position we're moving into, is that need to be on the ballot constantly. If it's for stabilizing things this year, and then trying to adjust the ask quickly in the next couple of years, none of that is going to be easy to do. But I also don't think that a 20 mil levy to make up for whatever this is, that certainly doesn't pass in this community, no matter what the story is, and we can't cut our way through that. So,
I mean, part of the story certainly will be the offset of the actual inside millage falling off. So I guess, that scenario of what it doesn't look like to increase, obviously we have a new tax, but increase taxes beyond what had fallen off this year.
right. And that's probably where I hope I end up in not the worst scenario, which is what these numbers are showing, but just the worst scenario, or if it's more akin to $2 million a year.
But could we ask
Could we go back to where we were 2 years ago after that, go back to that level of funding to make up for this inside millage change?
including the extra ask to make up for the inside millage?
That's right.
It's not quite break even, but you're talking about 12.6 mils versus 7.8.
Yeah.
That kind of keeps us whole. And that included, and I include that $700,000 in there for the technology.
And we were at, before the 2024 levy expiration, where
13.5.
we were at 13.5.
No, we're, yes, is that right? No, 9.7, I'm sorry,
No.
9.7.
Yeah.
9.7.
We're at 13.5 million.
Yeah, 13.5,
9.7 mils.
9.7 mils.
So 12.6 mils in the hypothetical just would include the 11 million, 7 point, whatever that is.
7.8.
Plus the existing taxes we're already paying through the inside millage.
Yes.
It's true. I mean, it's harder to explain that to the community, but it's just how we would recoup those existing funds.
Taking us back in terms of dollars to what akin to I'm going to get because it's getting late in the evening here, a fixed levy back in 2024. We couldn't do that because of the cut, or we couldn't have done that without doing cuts. We've done those cuts.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to what was option A, apologies, Mr. Anderson, you weren't here for option A, but what option A was back when we were looking at the 2024 initiative.
So I think I'm going to urge the board, at this point, we're kind of wait and see.
Yeah, I know. Again, I'm talking about, is it the worst or the worst? The
So-
worst, I don't have an answer right now.
Yeah, I actually have the worst, and the horrible worst. There's really three.
Yeah, it's 7.8 mils is where we were in May before the storm clouds gathered.
Yep.
And they're talking about eliminating 4.8 mils.
Yep.
So 4.8 plus 7.8, that puts you,
Well,
I mean,
12.6.
yeah. I mean, it's this for that.
But then we have to explain that to everybody.
Right.
No, but again, I think,
Yeah. And it could be 60%, yes. to get that.
I don't want to prolong this, but you
In
know,
this room.
yeah, to Mr. Anderson's point, I think you got to pick a window that's long enough that if you want to redefine how Perrysburg funds its schools, but that window is not a year. That window is not 2 years. That window is at least 3 years, because that's how long it takes if you want to do something other than a property tax, right? So converting, you know, that first step, converting it earned income, I mean, traditional to an earned income, step one. That's another year later, you're going to do another step. It takes 3 years. And you still have the question whether an income tax is better than a property tax. And I think I frankly am uncomfortable with that, just because it shifts, it takes all the burden off business, what little we get, onto property owners. But, I mean, that's the assessment we're going to have to do. You know, and we're going to, I think, you know, conference committee starts meeting tomorrow. So, and on the conference committee, if you guys, you saw the emails today, it's the chairs and the vice chairs from the House and Senate Finance Committees and the ranking members. And I've interacted with, I know Paula Hicks Hudson, who's a ranking member in the Senate Finance. She does not completely understand school finance, but she is on board to try to protect. But she is, you know, one voice out of the 6 on that. And, you know, I think the priority is some kind of property tax relief. And, you know, we're talking about worst case here. Maybe this is, hey, we're showing you the worst case, so we're grateful when you come into something a little bit better. That's always part of that game too. So,
Yeah, I think we understand we're in an environment where we just can't go to the voters and say, here's the bar and this is where we need you to be. We know we live in an environment where we have to come to the table and show what we've done, the sacrifices that we've made, what we've done to kind of earn the trust, and also demonstrate that fiscal accountability, which I think we've been doing that. So it's just that era that we're in now.
I just want to highlight again, you know, we've looked at slide 15 with the, you know, 6.4, 7.1 million from inside millage. I just want to highlight again, there are other elements of this bill that could still also negatively affect our ability to fund our schools. So,
and by the way, in those numbers, some of those other things are built into that. So we're taking into account, so that is the worst case. So just so you
in the scenario ones, yeah. Before I referenced slide 15, and we talked about who was on the committee up on the board, and I haven't gotten sign off from everybody yet about a special meeting Monday, July 7th, was that?
7th is 5:45.
Again, our goal was to originally consider the resolution for necessity today. With the uncertainty, it seems like a waste of emotion right now. So to wait for what comes out of conference committee so we can actually forecast appropriately rather than, and that'll take a little bit of time after it actually comes out, and then we hit a holiday weekend, so that 7th would be, I think, the first time realistically that we could have enough information to discuss this. So if that's, I don't know if that
Oh, we don't
works.
have the work session before that, do we?
No, and that would be the day after, or like it's right.
The work session was on the 2nd.
Yeah, and even if we had, well, no, actually, the work session was originally scheduled for the 9th. We had moved it off the 2nd. And the 2nd's too fast to get actual
We canceled the work session, and then we scheduled the retreat.
On the 12th.
That was the switch there. And so this is a bonus round.
So the schedule that week, if this meeting on the 7th, we would have a special meeting the evening at 5:45 on Monday the 7th, and then we would have our kind of retreat on that Saturday morning, the 12th. If we meet Monday and we're unable to immediately come to a decision, it also gives us other time that week to call a special meeting to meet again. Because we are starting to barrel down on our deadline.
So do we need a motion on that, or, I mean, it works for
Well,
me, so
I think,
what's the holdup?
Ms. Mankey, would that work for you on the 7th?
Yes, so I'm hoping to be back from vacation by then.
Okay. And I think, had I checked? Who had, I honestly don't remember at this point who I
No,
checked
you
with.
didn't check with me, but it's
Okay.
okay, I got it down.
All right. And Mr. Anderson?
Penciled you in as long as I'm
Okay.
out of the country.
So there is, in the technicality of it, I could call a special board meeting without vote, but we did include that in the agenda at 18 point something. So that will be in the agenda for our approval.
It's 18.5. It's not in your printed copy, but it is online.
It's online in the agenda, yeah.
Do we have a scenario of the 7.8 mil levy with the loss in inside mills? We don't have it yet? Okay.
Well, the fact is, I've run that scenario, and we should talk about it it's in the finance committee
Okay.
notes.
I can go look there.
But I think we're out of money in the third year.
Okay. So that
Remember
gets you-
right.
So that gets you to 3 years then.
Well,
ish.
maybe.
Are you on?
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we're essentially out of money at the end of that third year. So the question is whether or not I can get through that third year without borrowing.
So you're on the ballot in second year.
You're on the ballot in 26.
Yep, okay.
I think it's represented in the second half of this image there. I think that's,
I think he was looking for a little more detail than that.
think
Mr.
that
Anderson,
captures.
look in the finance committee
Yeah.
presentation on it, and I have that scenario there. If you got any questions, just let me
Yeah,
know.
so at 8.7 has that scenario. All right, other discussion about this, other than I hope people storm the State House with pitchforks and, okay, not that, but,
Whatever works.
yeah, whatever works. All right, I'm going to move us on to 11, Mr. Bennington, student achievement. Sorry.
Nope,
I
I got my
segued
notes.
there. I
No, you're
segued.
good, you're good. So, good minutes. I'll just focus really on the major discussion. State testing results have come in as of our meeting. The results were still being, digested, but, the highlights, some improvements in some areas, upward trends at the junior high in most areas. One thing that's interesting, need to kind of benchmark these results that we had against the results kind of overall in the state and just see, what changes occurred kind of in the testing versus, how those changes, may have impacted us specifically. Good, strong results at the elementary, and that's, with a lot of work with the new curriculum being rolled out, and just kind of shows how well the teachers have done, kind of teaching that new curriculum and the impact it had on the state test. Then we also spent some time talking about or going over the top 40 successes for the teaching and learning teaching and learning department during the year. That list is attached to the minutes here, so you can float through all of the great work that they did. Some highlights, and not in any order of importance or priority or impact, but successful year one implementation of Wit and Wisdom. Year one of the grading practice committee was launched. Creation of standard-based reporting in K through 4. Continued, support for the Jacket Way and PBIS implementation. Tier 2 behavioral supports being expanded, something that was brought up, the need for that brought up in last month's board meeting. So yeah, some other things that I'm sure are important that I haven't highlighted here, but I'd also give it context that all of that work was done in what was a very challenging school year anyway, with the budget issues and staffing issues and all that uncertainty. So the rest of the agenda items I think here are pretty self-explanatory as you read through them. So what did I miss?
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you,
that
Mr.
concludes my
Bennington.
report.
We move into 12, which is opportunity for other committees. We listed a couple of them here, not all of them, but the superintendent committees and then the foundation, I know, met. If there's any additional reporting anyone wants to provide.
The June operations meeting was canceled,
Oh,
so.
okay. That'll be a short report. Okay. We move into 13.1, and we have a consent agenda in front of us, items 14 through 18. And again, the not in your printed version is 18.5, the scheduling of a special board meeting in July.
What does SLIP stand for under 15.3?
BGSU ODHE SLIP grant.
Ohio Department of Higher Education. Anyone?
Trying to remember. What's SLIP stand for? Student? It's a student-teacher grant, isn't it? So when we have sometimes the higher ed education departments, when they place a student teacher, they'll provide a stipend to, and I think that's what that grant does. Is that not right, Brent?
For specific training, science or reading ahead of time.
Okay, science or reading.
I'd like to request a pull 17.1. That's not right. Is it 17.1?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we'll
okay.
pull out of the consent agenda 17.1, and that'll be a separate discussion and vote. Any other items to pull? Okay, with the consent agenda minus 17.1 in front of us, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Oh,
Okay.
I heard Mr. Bennington and then Ms. Larimer.
Yeah, stereo.
Mr. Jura, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Yes.
Ms. Menke.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Rowland Miller.
Yes. Which leads us to then consider 17.1, which was the administrative reduction in force. We've been doing these kind of each month, different parts of the staff, and this month it's administrative reduction in force.
So I needed a little clarification on this, and I wanted to be sure that other people understood.
I want to have a motion, and then second, then we can discuss. Does
Okay.
anyone want to move this motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Bennington, Mr. Anderson, Ms. Larimer, would you like to discuss?
Okay. I wanted to be sure that people understood that there have been 3 administrative positions cut, that it's not just this one. So that was kind of important, but the reason why I requested that it be pulled is because it affects a very close personal friend of mine, and I did not feel that I would be fair in my judgment of voting on this one. So I will be abstaining from this vote. We fought real hard for that position, and I understand the need to cut administrators where we can in that regard. So I can see it, but I think it's wrong for me to participate in this vote. And Randy said that he could absorb the work that the assistant treasurer does. So I'm grateful to you for being able to do that with everything that the state is piling on you on top of everything else. As a member of this community, I thank you for your work that you're doing, because it's just piling, and I feel like it's really a lot on both of your shoulders. So I'm sad to see this position go for many, many reasons, but way too close to home for me to be able to vote on that.
I appreciate you highlighting there were 2 other administrative positions that were cut. That's a reduction, but those people were able to shift into other roles within the district. So thanks for highlighting that. Any other discussion?
I just want to add, none of these are taken lightly, right? Because there are human beings involved, whether it's this one position, these 3 administrative positions, or the other, 20 or 30 other folks that we had reductions, but fortunately had retirements, we can call them back. This is unfortunately when you're in the finance world, it's a single track profession. We can't bump into a building, we can't bump into a classroom. It's a tough one.
Okay. Mr. Giroux, roll call, please.
Mr. Bennington.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Ms. Menke.
Yes.
Ms. Larimer.
Abstain.
Ms. Roland Miller.
Yes. All right. Motion passes. We move into board discussion. Any other business we haven't covered yet? At 9 o'clock. All right. I have no other people that signed up for public comment. And so if there are no objections, I will adjourn the meeting.
No objection.
All right, so adjourned.